welcome to another stream. Let me pause the music real quick. Okay. Whew. I'm out of breath. Give me a second. I just ran back up the like down the stairs and then back up, and like now I'm like I'm like super fried. So other than that, we have a good stream to talk about today. We have a good content to talk about. A lot of stuff. Some stuff about Final Fantasy 9 Remake, some stuff about Final Fantasy 7 Remake, and we'll probably play a little bit of Trails at the end, hopefully, if we don't get too lost in the sauce on the first two topics, because I like to ramble, and you guys like when I ramble, and we go in circles. Squall UA, thank you so much for the tier 1 subtext. Thank you for the tier 1. I'm just now seeing that. I appreciate it so much. You guys are the best. Dang, you guys are both subtext for 38 months and Squall UA for 50 months. God damn. My bros, I appreciate you. I don't know how, but somehow this FF9 situation is your fault. I feel it in my bones. It is. It is. They delayed it because they were like, damn. After NSP's Final Fantasy X video, we have to cancel Final Fantasy 9 Remake and remake 10 now. Because his 10 video was so good. I actually do want to do a stream playthrough of FF9 and then an essay like we've done for FF10 and Kingdom Hearts eventually. But I think I'm going to wait till Final Fantasy 9 Remake gets announced, assuming it will at this rate. Yeah. That's true, Clout. And we're gonna talk about that today. Really the meat of this discussion part of the stream is really gonna be focused on Final Fantasy 7 Remake, actually, because there's actually some pretty good news on some FF7R stuff, particularly regarding a potential for DLC, the potential for a full new game, which is really weird because the way Hamaguchi described it, it was like left somewhat ambiguous on whether he meant Final Fantasy 7 Remake, hypothetically part 4, like an additional new part of Final Fantasy 7 Remake that goes beyond the ending, or if he meant like Final Fantasy 17. It's that ambiguously worded. So actually, let me make sure I have that pulled up for us. Shout out to Shinra Archaeology Department, because they make finding every FF7 interview so easy. I can just go and they already have it posted. And they also have all of basically the major quotes, like the actual news from the interviews that feel like significant. So, for a creator like me, I can just go and be like, hey, this is what they said. Okay, I think I've almost caught my breath. I'm not out of shape, clearly, but when you run up and down the stairs and then you have to give a speech, which is basically what this is, like a 4-hour long speech, you feel pretty cooked after. Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 4 is low-key a game adaptation of Advent Children. That's what I imagine it would be. And I'm not going to lie, a game adaptation of Advent Children does make the fucking 16-year-old inside of me so excited, because, that's what we all wanted back in the day. And originally, when Advent Children was starting production, they had considered making Final Fantasy VII 2, right? Like that was like one of the things that they were kind of wanting to do. But the team that was doing this was VisualWorks, and VisualWorks is a CG studio. And as a CG studio, you know, is a team that had no experience with making an actual video game. And so, because they didn't have any experience with making a video game, they did not want to make Final Fantasy VII 2, which would have been something extremely ambitious. And so they settled on making a film. And that's a part of, you know, the story for that. But at the time, I do think making Final Fantasy VII 2 would have been great and people would have loved it. Could have made that shit play like Kingdom Hearts. And people would have thought it was awesome. I don't think that would be part 4. I think a game adaptation of AC would be a true sequel, like a Final Fantasy VII 2. Yeah, it would be. Or, I mean, like, I don't know how possible it would be to make Advent Children into a DLC, but I think it would be a very ideal DLC for part 3, right? Like, how cool would it be if we ended the FF7R trilogy with the playable Advent Children 5 to 10 hour DLC, right? No better way to send off the FF7 universe, I think. I'm late. Did he address the news already? No. We have not. I had to recover my stamina bar. Because I've been running around. And now I'm like completely out of breath. What if playable AC is in the main part 3 game? That would be fucking awesome. That's like also something that they could do to like, again, go above and beyond. So we can start with this. Give me 1 sec. That's the wrong one. I always do this. That's the right one. And let's zoom in a little bit. Oh, I'm covering some shit. Okay. Sweet. Here we are. All right. So a lot of people have been wondering where Final Fantasy IX Remake is, right? We've all wanted to know this, especially because the last time that we got any information from Nate the Hate, Nate had said that he had heard that Final Fantasy IX Remake was canceled. And of course, we were all very distraught by this news. I definitely do not want to see this game canceled. I'm a huge fan of the game, a huge fan of the series, obviously, and I want Final Fantasy IX Remake to be a thing. However, unfortunately, we had gotten potential news that this game had been canceled, and so Nate does not actually have an update here, but someone did ask Nate, hey, at Nate the Hate 2, do you have news about Final Fantasy IX Remake is canceled, or is it still in Square Enix's plans? And Nate the Hate replied, have no new information to share. For now, I'd assume the game is on ice. An unknown is whether... For now, I'd assume the game is on ice, and the unknown is whether Square Enix will return to it or not. So, let's be clear about something important here. This is not necessarily an update. This is not him getting new information. This is Nate, as an industry insider, providing his assumption on what is happening. This being said, obviously, him kind of coming to this speculation, this conclusion that potentially the game could be on ice is not very good, right? Him not having any new information to share, again, not very good, because you would think that with the game being so close to finish, that there would be some type of new information coming out. Joshy Poo, thank you so much for the tier 1, brother. Appreciate you. Again, obviously, the closer games get to being released, the more information comes out about them. The more journalists go hands-on, the more content creators go hands-on, the more playtesters go hands-on, the more people see the game, and more information about the game gets out. However, what seems to be happening here is that as we're going along, information has seemingly dried up. And of course, it makes sense for people to worry about that, and likely why Nate would assume that the game is on ice and does not know whether Square Enix will return to it or not. So, not the best thing. FF9 Remake on ice is something I've been thinking about for ages. I've been saying as well, people who keep saying, but the NVIDIA leak doesn't matter. We ate so many years after that leak with multiple restructurings of SE later that it isn't wholly accurate. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? Is that since that leak happened, we've had $300 million worth of projects canceled, right? And we've also had a restructuring. And all the creative studios aren't quite the same as they used to be. And, you know, all that stuff means a lot of changes. This thing leaked way before we had all the information, or it leaked before all of those changes that happened in Square Enix. And so now we're looking at a different Square Enix than the Square Enix where the game leaked. So, God damn. Let me move the chat down here. You can't even see it because of Twitter. Put it. Damn. Is there a way to just make the opacity on it bigger? We could just do this. Hey, there we go. And we can just, there you go. Now you can see chat. From what I was hearing in the games journalism realm was that if we don't hear about FF9 Remake at Game Awards, then it's probably not getting finished. But we were all in agreement it was worked on. Fuck, right? Dude. And that's the thing too. It's just that there are so many people that have gone hands-on with it, have seen it. We know it's real. Oops, I didn't mean to click off. We know it's real. We know that they're not, you know, this many people can't be colluding to make something up. Not to mention the database leaks, right? The database leaks. And it wasn't just the NVIDIA leak, right? It was also the Epic Games Store leak. So we've had this game from two different sources now that were not like rumors, not like some journalist saying, oh, hey, I played it. Not some content creator reading 4chan, right? This was discovered via a hack into basically databases. Private information that was revealed, right? Like as legitimate of a leak as can be. And almost every other game in that leak, I think we're at 99%. Almost every game, I think, has been announced or released at this point from the NVIDIA leak. And then also with us having the Epic Games leak, where they even had leaked pre-orders. Leaked pre-orders for, you know, what the game would have if you pre-ordered it. I don't trust leaks. Leaks are like the one thing that you can trust. You shouldn't trust rumors, but leaks are like legit. You can trust a leak usually. I mean, obviously, if it actually leaks out, then that's the truth, right? Like if it's a real legitimate leak, which the NVIDIA leak was. So, you would think if there was ever a time for any FF9 remake, it'd be during the anniversary year. That's another thing too, right? Is that we are looking at the anniversary year and they're coming out with all of this merch, and it's lined up with the fact that we know that a Final Fantasy IX remake was supposed to be coming, right? It seems a lot like this was supposed to coincide with the announcement of that remake, and something is going on with that remake such that they can't announce it now. Or maybe, heaven forbid that it's been canceled in some capacity or it's not coming out anymore. Again, can't stress enough, I would hate for that to happen. But that is all a real possibility. Again, this 25th anniversary stuff is just like, it's so lined up, and we know that we're supposed to be getting a remake, and they know that we know. And part of me does like kind of wonder if, again, this is like a worst come to worst scenario, if they aren't kind of thinking like, basically, this is just, we're just going to put out all the merch and the game is canceled and we're still just going to put it all out because why not put out all the merch and still celebrate Final Fantasy IX? Again, I don't want that to be the case. I hope that's not the case. But that is a real possibility. We know it's real. There's plenty of evidence of it. The leak, the new artwork, the plan for an animated series, new renders and figures, the FF9 stuff, and the latest Final Fantasy XIV expansion. That's also true, Crossy, because you guys got to remember, Dawn Trail also decisively being like this big Final Fantasy IX reference. It just all lines up with the 25th anniversary. And then we have this leak that there's supposed to be an FF9 remake, and then it just suddenly disappears. I don't know, man. But we also have to accept very likely the game is also at the very least on ice. I'm not saying that it's true, but I am saying that, yeah, I would probably agree that it's a possibility. Yeah, the FF9 anniversary was always going to happen regardless if FF9 remake was canceled. FF14 also has a lot of FF9 stuff, and that was supposedly for a reason, yeah. I think it's also like really important to highlight too that it doesn't feel like they're just celebrating FF9's 25th anniversary, right? Because what did FF8 get? Right? I'm pretty sure FF8's 25th anniversary was last year, wasn't it? And FF8 got fucking nothing that I know of or that I can think of immediately. I don't think FF8 got any new merch. Certainly wasn't getting an animated series or a book or anything like that. FF8 kind of got shafted. I think all FF8 got was a new piece of art. Yeah, pretty much. I don't even know if it got that. Did it? I don't remember. But yeah, FF8 did not get much. And I know FF8 fans are already kind of jaded because they're like, we're already not getting a remake. You skipped over us. And we don't get like 25th anniversary merch too. But who knows, right? Maybe Final Fantasy VIII, what they'll do is that they'll do stuff for the 30th anniversary of FF8. That'll be like the big celebration. But that's like what, 2029? So FF8 is still underrated. I'll die on this hill. I like FF8. In a way, I feel like FF8 and FF2, first of all, are not as bad necessarily as people say. I can't really comment too much on FF2 because I played the Pixel Remaster. And so when you're playing the Pixel Remaster, everything is great because it's got all the quality of life features and it's up to date and it's not nearly as punishing, but I still enjoyed it. But I actually kind of feel like FF2 and FF8 are still kind of Final Fantasy at its most interesting in a way because it's doing exactly what I'm talking about when I talk about them having a framework and experimenting and coming up with new innovative ideas within the Final Fantasy brand identity, right? So Final Fantasy VIII introduces a fuck ton of new mechanics, some of them good, some of them not so good, but it takes a lot of big swings at innovating on its progression systems, on innovating on its presentation style. And all of those things add up to make FF8, at the very least, one of the most interesting Final Fantasy games that has ever released, right? So I always feel like FF8 is kind of like a perfect example of this thing I always talk about, where it's like you can innovate really hardcore, you can change things up, and Final Fantasy can have an identity too. Like it's not like a either or type thing. Right? You can mix things up and still be recognizably a Final Fantasy. Which is where I think I get into discourse with people. I gotta say though, Nightscape Prince and anyone in chat, if you're disappointed in FF and the remakes or lack of, perfect time to explore the series. Hell, look at Trails in the Sky remake, and we'll likely get another second chapter remake within the next year as well. We also have Dragon Quest remakes, the Saga games. I would say Tales of, but Bamco shit. Point is, yeah, it sucks, but silver lining. I think that actually Final Fantasy fans that have basically kind of been disappointed with the series have kind of already spread out to different JRPGs. As it is, I think that great migration has already kind of happened in a large way. So a lot of it toward Atlas, a lot of it toward games like, Persona and Metaphor, and then a lot of it toward the most recent Expedition 33, etc., etc. A lot of them are picking up Dragon Quest now and Xenoblade. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of people, disappointed in the lack of FF releases. I think they are finding new JRPGs because, I mean, we're starting to see those JRPGs kind of rise in sales, and we're starting to see FF kind of sink in. And I do think that a lot of people who have felt like they aren't getting what they want have migrated to a lot of those other series anyways. Yeah, I don't think FF8 is bad at all. I don't think, not to say that FF8 doesn't have some warranted criticisms. You can definitely play FF8 and think, why did they choose to do this? For sure. But again, I look at FF8 and I do think of 8 as Final Fantasy ingenuity and inventiveness at its finest, right? It's a really cool game. And it took a lot of big swings. Did it knock every single thing out of the park? Probably not. But it's so cool that the game even existed, and I think a lot of things about FF8 are still core to the series' identity now. Yeah, Triple Triad card games. That's FF8. I respect how fucking bold FF8 was. They came off of doing a Hollywood blockbuster with FF7 into kind of a heady existential thing. Yeah. FF8 took big swings, man. It's a very cool game. Super cool game. I do think that something with FF8 maybe should happen, And I get remake fatigue, and I get everyone saying that Square and their development talent need to move on. And we can't be hung up on remakes of Final Fantasy games all day. And trust me, I think I've actually, in many ways, have been at the forefront of saying this many times. But at the same time, from a business perspective, remakes really are keeping a lot of game companies afloat right now. I think I heard a statistic the other day that said something like it was either like 80 or 90% of gamers have played a remake in like the past year. Something absurd like that. And there are all these remakes coming out. And one of the things that remakes are serving a core function for is that for these long running series, right? If you have a long running series and it's going to take a lot of time between big video game number 4 and big video game number 5, what you do nowadays is you put out remakes and remasters, and those fill in the gaps for the new major release. And they're a lot easier to do than creating new games, and sometimes even easier to do than creating spin-offs of those new games, because again, you already have the blueprint for success. And so it is a lot faster to get those things out compared to, say, a brand new game. A prime example of something like this would be Persona 3 Reload. Persona 3 Reload started development in 2019 and then released in 2024. Persona 6, however, has been in development for God knows how fucking long. It has been in development probably before Persona 3 Reload, and it is still in development probably after Persona 4 Revival. So, you can get these remakes out pretty fast, and they can fill in the gaps between the next major release. This is exactly what we're seeing the Dragon Quest series do right now. We have Dragon Quest 1, 2, and 3 having remakes, and also they're doing a remake of Dragon Quest 7. This is keeping Dragon Quest fans entertained in between Dragon Quest 11 and 12. It is basically the core Dragon Quest content right now. And, one of the reasons that they're able to do this is because it's a hell of a lot easier than just getting Dragon Quest 12 out of the door. Because these newer games, again, it takes a lot of time. Not only does development take a lot of time, of course, but the thing is that honestly, conceptualizing a brand new game, coming up with all the game mechanics, spending all the money, planning, the creativity involved, and then also you have to kind of spread the core creatives then. Spin-offs and other stuff, yes, those are great, but remakes sell a lot more, and remasters sell a lot more. So what companies are going to do is continue to sell you more remakes, more remasters, and that is going to fill in the gap between the major releases. So I don't think that Final Fantasy IX Remake, for example, would be a bad thing, because it is going to be a while before we get Final Fantasy 17. And the Final Fantasy VII remakes also helped fill in the gap between Final Fantasy 15 and 16. So I raise you the idea of remakes and remasters to fill the space between new games like Persona and DQ, and I give you Falcom remakes and remaster alongside brand new games in their two main series, alongside working on new entries and other IPs like Xanadu. Yeah, they're awesome. Falcom is super awesome about this, and I think that Capcom is also really awesome about it too. That's why Capcom has been alternating between remakes and brand new games. So I don't think it's a bad idea for them to remake all of the main line Final Fantasy titles, like 1 through 10. All of the classic ones. Honestly, they should probably still, they might could even go beyond that if they wanted to. I'm saying that business-wise, not necessarily as an art enjoyer. As an art enjoyer, I want a brand new game. I want Final Fantasy 17, 18, 19. I want the next new thing. But I understand that development and business are intrinsically linked to, our capitalist system. And so we can't just we can't just say like, oh yeah, they can just dedicate all the time to that, all, or we can just push this out faster or something like that. No, they want to make money in between those major releases, and those major releases are going to take time. They take a lot of time nowadays. And so, we're not going to get like Final Fantasy 17 immediately. And so those remakes can fill the gaps. This is basically the strategy that every series is going to be moving toward. Another reason that remakes and remasters are so popular is that you don't have to have the internal studio working on them, right? I know that there are some hardcore FromSoft fans that are not the biggest fan of, say, the Demon Souls remake. But here's the thing about Demon Souls remake. FromSoft did not have to derail the projects that they were working on in order for Demon Souls to get remade. They are able to outsource it to an external studio like Bluepoint, and they can handle the remake. And there's already an existing blueprint of the game. You can literally look at the original and you know what the thing is supposed to be. And so development only really needs the oversight. It just really needs the key people looking over it and making sure that everything is properly aligned. And then you're able to continue working on the brand new games that only you can develop. This is another reason why remakes are continuing to get more popular, because again, you can just outsource them, throw them at some other company, and they can make the remake for you. And that's really good, because you can't just do that. Even with like spin-offs, that can be a little tough, because if you were to work on like, a brand new Persona spinoff or something, or a brand new Dragon Quest spinoff, then you want like the artists and the musicians who are responsible for making sure that it feels like that series to be involved, and you have to spread them thin. You don't even have to do that nearly as much as you do with outsourced remakes, because they still do that with outsourced remakes. I'm lying. But you know what I mean. You don't have to have as much hands-on involvement for that stuff. You can have a lot of people doing ghost work and not necessarily the same studio doing it. You know what I mean. I think the FF remake issue is that Dragon Quest isn't having that for some reason. Nobody they outsource to can get them down. Since FF7 went to CyberConnect 2, it was going well with portables, so you got a situation where the FF17 team is also working on FF7R3. FCBU1 is doing it right. That's the thing though too, right? Is that like the fiasco with CyberConnect 2 probably had devastating consequences on Final Fantasy 17, right? If you really think about it, it probably fucked Final Fantasy 17 over. Because if you think about it for a minute here, Creative Studio 1 was probably going to be working on Final Fantasy 17 in-house, right? But what happened is that Final Fantasy 7 remake at CyberConnect 2 didn't end up happening, right? So they ended up having to pull FF7R back in-house. But you can imagine that FF17 probably was going to follow up a lot closer to FF16 originally. But because they had to pull 7R back in-house, that probably delayed 17 by a long time. And so I do believe that CS1 is working on Final Fantasy 17, but holy crap, man. That probably was going to be a PS5 game. Probably was going to come out like a little bit after Final Fantasy 16. Yeah. And then who knows how long that Final Fantasy VII Remake got delayed by once they had to pull it back in-house. Some people had speculated, I'd have to go back and look at all the evidence, but it was heavily speculated that FF7 Remake, the first part, was supposed to originally launch on that Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 1 was supposed to launch like in 2018, but that didn't happen. And then it ended up launching in 2020, and the reason it got delayed by 2 years was essentially the issues with CyberConnect 2. So, yeah. Robert Smith, thank you for the super chat. 6 Remake has to happen. I do think that 6 Remake will happen, bro. I think that it's going to be an HD 2D game, probably. But I do think that a 6 Remake will happen. I don't think they'll do a AAA remake of it, because I think a AAA remake of 6 is just too much. It would definitely take more time and is way harder to get right than even Final Fantasy VII Remake. So I do think that it'll happen. It's probably not right now. And I do think that Team Asano will be the ones handling it. Speaking of outsourcing, though, it's very interesting when you look at Dragon Quest as a series. It has always been outsourced. Dragon Quest 1 through 5 were developed by Chunsoft and only published by Enix. 6 and 7 by Heartbeat, and 8 and 9 by Level 5. It's only been 10 and 11 that they have been done in-house, and even 11 had outsourcing along the way. But 12 is in-house and has faced development issues. Just interesting. Wow. That's funny, because that means don't let Square develop it internally. No, I'm kidding, but that is interesting, right? Damn, dude. SC might legit be the problem here. Maybe so. If every Dragon Quest game has been outsourced, and then like the one that's having like the most issues is 12 and it's in-house, it is kind of like, Yeah, I don't know, man. Actually, probably since 3DS, bro. I forget the FF4 remake, the devs FF4 remake, but they went on to work on Bravely Default, Flying Fairy under Team Asano's group instead of FF5 and 6, which got put into another dev's hands, and it was not working out. Yeah. I do think it's a shame, though, that we never got those 3DS remakes or DS. I guess it'd be 3DS at that time. Remakes of 5 and 6. Because I really do like the remake of 4. And I'm gonna just say some shit. But like, I don't know how many of you know this, but originally Final Fantasy 3 remake, the 3D one, was planned to be like a PlayStation 2 game, and then they met with like someone at Nintendo. I want to say it was Iwata, but I don't remember. I have to go back and look. But they met with someone at Nintendo. And they convinced them to make the game for DS instead. Low key, I wish that meeting never happened. I'm sorry. I do. I wish it never happened, bro. FF3 and 4, like PS2 remake. Shit. Would have been way better, dog. Sorry, not sorry, but like, okay, so, and part of the reason for this is not even like the graphics, it's actually the voice acting. Because I feel like the voice acting in Final Fantasy IV Remake is so good. It's so good. And like, if you could have had that game fully voiced, it would have been like the ultimate definitive version of FF4 story. Like, no question. No question. And the voice acting in the new scenes, oh my God, they added so much to FF4. It was like, you know, so if 3 and 4 were on like PS2, it would have been dope. Yeah, it being on PSP would have also been pretty cool, but it would have been like 2 UMDs. The Tactics voice acting is also fantastic. Dude, Tactics Tactics Evilise Chronicles voice acting is so next level. But I don't think that CPU3 has ever had like a problem with getting incredible voice actors to work on their games. I think that they've always been really consistent about that. You know, ever since they first made Final Fantasy 12 and 14 and 16 are all some of the best voiced video games and the best localized JRPGs pretty much ever. So FF4 starts 24 hours too late. The opening and tutorial should have been the attack on the Black Mage Village. How cool would that have been? That would have been interesting. When we do Final Fantasy 4 Rebirth, we can we can do it like that. I want Ben in the next FF14 expansion. I mean, in some form or in some way, Ben is going to come to FF14. I'm just waiting for the actual thing to happen. I'm curious if he's going to play like literal Clive or if he's going to play like another character. But I do think that Ben will eventually come to FF14 in some way, voicing some character. So I'm pretty excited for that. But I actually do think, though, that they're going to save him, and he is going to voice, like, literal Clive in 14. Like, I know that Clive they already had, like, that. They already had, like, their little crossover event, but I think that they're actually going to. I think they're actually going to basically, like, put Clive in 14 eventually. I think they're going to canonize 14 and 16 together. Like, eventually. I don't know if that will happen sooner or later, but, like, I do think that they will do it. Like, I think that, like, 16 story will actually become part of 14 at some point. Yeah, CS3 knows what they're doing when it comes to production. I think their difficulty comes from segueing from the MMO to single player RPGs. 12 is an MMO, but it has substantial MMO DNA in it. Yeah, I mean, the thing is that they always want to make MMOs even when they make single player games. They make MMOs. For a while, I thought that, like, maybe it's just the limitations of the time, but they just really like an MMO style game. And hey, you know, maybe that's fair. There are people that do like the offline MMO feeling. I mean, that's basically what the Xenoblade series thrives on. So, granted, I do think that I like Xenoblade's combat more than, like, say, like FF12 or 16s. But yeah, even Xenoblade aims for still, like, an offline MMO type feeling. So, oops, is that the one? This is the one. Let's actually go to the source real quick. Let me read this. Hi. Shit. Part of it's kind of cropped off. Gotch, thank you for subbing, man. I appreciate it. Dude, 68 months. Christ, I think you are the person who has the record for, like, my longest, like, subscription, like, ever. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Okay, so let's talk about this. Let me line all this up. Okay, so we've got some brand new Final Fantasy VII Re-Trilogy news. Hamaguchi has been doing a ton of new interviews for the Switch 2 release of FF7R, and we are looking at a very interesting article. So Final Fantasy VII Rebirth did not have any DLC. And this is probably for the better, because Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is one of the most feature complete video games I've ever seen. Now, yes, it is a remake that only has a third of the original game's story, plus or minus. However, in terms of the overwhelming amount of content, the overwhelming amount of features, combat, it basically is its own standalone mainline Final Fantasy, and arguably goes way above many single player FFs in terms of the amount of content that it has, in terms of the quality of the game. It's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing. Again, that's why I would call it one of the most feature-complete games of the past generation. And here they're talking about DLC from Rebirth. And what's interesting is that they did have some ideas for DLC for Rebirth, but they decided not to pursue them. So here is what the interview says. The interviewer asked, are there any plans for a DLC to bridge the gap between Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and the third title in the remake project, similar to Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade? Hamaguchi saying, there were definitely some ideas to create a Rebirth DLC, and that was planned at a certain point in time. But when we revisited this topic and we thought about what our priorities should be and what fans are looking forward to the most, we figured that what fans want the most is to bring the third installment as soon as possible. That would take priority over the Rebirth DLC, so we decided to take that approach. With that being said, once we release the third installment, there is a possibility of a DLC for that third installment. With the conclusion of the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy, there's probably going to be a much wider audience for Final Fantasy as a whole. Whether we bring another new DLC or a full title, that's something we are actively considering. So the first part of this statement is not too crazy, right? In fact, I'm pretty sure we've heard it before. They didn't want to work on DLC for Rebirth because they wanted to go immediately into delivering us Part 3 as soon as humanly possible, and I would say that was the correct decision to do. Because between getting a Rebirth DLC and getting Part 3, I would rather just have Part 3. What is brand new is this second paragraph here, where he's basically saying, yes, we are considering DLC for Part 3, which is actually pretty nuts to even hear anything about, considering that Part 3 has not even officially been announced yet. But what I think is even more crazy, even more insane, is this part right here, Chad. Or a full title. So this is kind of worded a little bit ambiguously to me, because it can be read either way, right? It can be read like we are considering Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 4. Or it can be read that we need to follow up with a new Final Fantasy title, right? Like a new full Final Fantasy title. Because as we read this, as we look at it again, it says, with the conclusion of the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy, there's probably going to be a much wider audience for Final Fantasy as a whole. That's an interesting statement. And then he says, whether we bring another new DLC or a full title, that's something that we're actually actively considering. I don't think he's talking about 7 Part 4. I don't think he is either. Maybe. Maybe. I think I don't think it means part 4. I don't think it means part 4 either. I think it could mean Final Fantasy 17. Right? There's two ways of reading this, right? There's like bring another full new title Final Fantasy 7, bring a full new title Final Fantasy. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it's lumped with DLC, which I think can make you initially think, does he mean Final Fantasy 7? But I feel like he means Final Fantasy 17. If it were FF17, I feel like he'd word it differently. It's possible. I want it to mean Final Fantasy 17, but I don't think he means that. I want him to mean that is Final Fantasy 17, right? But it could read either way, honestly. I don't think it means part 4. Do you know how many fans will be upset to learn about a whole other game while the expectation was just to have the conclusion with the third part? Okay. So, I think I'm going to say something I don't know if you'll agree with, and I know FF7 fans won't. But once FF7 is done and whatever DLC it does or doesn't gets wrapped up, SC needs to leave the 7 IP alone for a good while for the health of the FF brand, the whole compilation, not just the 7 compilation. They need to get people who love 7 and the remake trilogy into their future FF projects as well. They cannot keep fracturing the brand into subgroups. Yeah, no, I actually do agree with you for sure there. I don't think that making more 7 is the best idea at the moment, right? I know that some people will say, and I firmly disagree with this, that like that SC shouldn't have like even remade Final Fantasy 7. I think that's like nuts, considering that people begged for a remake of Final Fantasy 7 for ages. And so I think it's absolutely ludicrous to assume that they shouldn't have done this. I think that there are different ways in which they could have evaluated how they approached doing it for sure. But remaking Final Fantasy VII was something they had to do. But I do think after 3 parts, I'm good, man. I'm good. I just wanted to experience Final Fantasy VII at this level of like visual quality and gameplay spectacle. But I think I'm good. I agree. I don't like the FF7 hate and the FF7 fatigue people are getting. I love FF7, but I don't want people to hate it. So I think they should give it a long break before returning to it later, returning to it in some way. Yeah, that's how I feel too. You don't want to make people hate FF7 or be like, oh my God, I'm so tired of FF7 slop, right? You don't want to get people to that point. And part of the reason that this remake was so highly anticipated was because, you know, we waited for FF7 to come back for so long. Yes, SE made the re-trilogy because their core fans wanted it. They shouldn't have put that tech demo out so long ago. I enjoyed what we got, but yeah, let FF7 rest. Yeah. I think that now is the time to let FF7 rest. I think that I want part 3 to essentially be the thing that makes me feel like FF7 is complete. Complete is a terrible word. I just can't think of another word. But like the feeling of being at rest. Like this chapter of my life has been fulfilled. Oh my God, Labib Zahid. Oh my God. Thank you for the insane $50 super chat. God damn, brother. Whoa, holy shit, dude. Thank you. Thank you. FF7 spinoff and tie it into FF10. Let's fucking go. Let's fucking go. Final Fantasy 7. They should like do it like Final Fantasy 7 -X. and it'll connect the two. Brilliant idea. Thank you so much for that insane super chat, brother. I appreciate it. He pre-bought you part 3. Yeah. No shit. Thank you so much. But DLC is really interesting, right? So let's suppose that they let's suppose they do something after Final Fantasy VII Return, right? Again, we're just tentatively calling Part 3 that because it's gained some popularity within the community. So let's say after Part 3, Return, they decide to make more content. I think the only thing you can do, whether you make it a DLC, whether you make it a full game, I would like for it to be a DLC because I think making it a DLC is like the only appropriate thing you can do. But they need to make Final Fantasy VII Advent Children into playable content. Whichever way they want to approach it. I think if you want to send off Final Fantasy VII in the ultimate way, make it feel like the 7 trilogy is the most complete FF7 experience that you can ever have in your life. You want to replay Final Fantasy VII. You want to experience the world of Final Fantasy VII. This is the thing to do it. The thing that would make my teenage dreams complete. Make Advent Children into playable content, into a DLC that you can get after Part 3 drops. And that will generate so much hype that I actually do think that people who haven't been checking out the Final Fantasy VII retrilogy might actually get wind of it because I think it will make people go insane. I think that playable Advent Children is the only thing that you can do after Part 3 that would make people go crazy. I don't think that people would go super crazy for Dirge Remaster. Like, some people would pick it up. Some of you I know would freak the fuck out over Dirge Remaster. But I think the thing that everyone would want the most would be Advent Children as playable content. I would rather it be a DLC because I don't think we need more than 5 or 10 hours to make Advent Children a full playable thing. I think a full Advent Children game is overkill. I think it's just too much. It's just too much, and you would basically have to it would mostly be new game, right? Because you're taking you look at Advent Children Complete, which is I think 2.5 hours, maybe 2 hours, something like that. You look at Advent Children Complete, and making that into a 40-hour game is just absurd. But I could see them doing 2 short DLCs, one for Advent Children and one for Dirge with the new epilogue tying off whatever the fuck is going on with Genesis. That would also be interesting. See, I wouldn't mind them doing Final Fantasy VII too, honestly, but the fact that we got a trilogy of the first game has kind of turned me off of FF7 too. Again, it kind of makes me go back to the idea that maybe this should have just been 2 games and then a 3rd game that comes out that is Final Fantasy VII 2, right? Like an actual proper FF7 2. Probably would have been a better approach than doing a remake trilogy and then try and see what you can do after FF7 is over. But there's also some other stuff in here. If fans ask for it, would you consider a standalone Queen's Blood game to be a priority? And Hamaguchi says, as I mentioned in my previous response, the utmost important right now is to work hard towards the 3rd installment and make sure it gets released as soon as possible with the highest quality achievable. Right now, the solo Queen's Blood title is probably not in the list of priorities. We actually haven't determined any priorities after the release of the 3rd installment. So things are really up in the air right now. If there is enough demand, a solo Queen's Blood title is definitely something we can consider. Obviously, yeah, they're still working hard on part 3. However, the idea of getting a solo Queen's Blood is not out of the question, and I think people would definitely play it. That is the type of mobile game that I want to see get announced, and maybe less Dissidia Duelum and more of Queen's Blood mobile game arc. I think I would actually be way more into like playing multiplayer Queen's Blood with people than I would be anything else like Final Fantasy mobile related. So yeah, let's move on to this one right here. Okay. Let me see if it'll let me. Yay. Quite the topic. We might need to zoom in a little bit. Okay. So, I know you guys love talking about this one. This is the talk of the town. Is the future only action-based? I think he gives a fairly standard answer here, but not only does he give that answer, he also talks about Expedition 33. So, the interviewer said, before closing our interview, I wanted to know what Hamaguchi feels about the future of the series outside the remake trilogy. The main Final Fantasy titles have abandoned the classic turn-based combat for many years now, basically to attract new players. But Square Enix hasn't stopped releasing turn-based games, like the Octopath series or the most recent version of Final Fantasy Tactics. I bring Clair Obscur Expedition 33 as an example of a turn-based game that has attracted many Western players. And ask Hamaguchi whether he thinks that main FF titles might come back, and ask Hamaguchi whether he thinks the main FF titles might come back to the series' roots. That's an interesting question, he says. As you mentioned, FF7 Remake and FF16 are both action-based RPG designs, essentially for the main numbered Final Fantasy series. The game design is based on the director's decision himself. For the new title, whether it's action or turn-based, that's not predetermined yet. If you would ask me, is my next game going to be an RPG? Yes, there is definitely a possibility. But is it going to be a turn-based RPG? We're taking this aside from the fact that Expedition 33 was well received. We received a lot of JRPGs are back comments. For me, I'm thinking about what experience fans will enjoy. That's the most important point. And I think that is the end of his statement. Oh no, it's not. He says down here, I'm not just going to make a game and say, I'm making a turn-based game or I'm making an action game. It can go either way. What's most important is finding out what game design will appeal to the fans. Very interesting. So, if you would ask me, is my next game going to be an RPG? Yes, there's definitely a possibility. Brother, I know because you're working on Final Fantasy 17. I know it. I'm going to keep gaslighting myself and telling myself that. I know it's true. So Hamaguchi says the same as Yoshi P. At least they're consistent in that regard. Yeah. So, excuse me. They aren't ruling out turn-based. but they're definitely not saying that they're going to do turn-based. I think that if you have expectations that Final Fantasy 17 will be turn-based, I think that you have misplaced expectations. If there will be another turn-based Final Fantasy game, that would probably be Final Fantasy 18. The reason being is that Final Fantasy 17 is likely already in some form of development and being worked on in some capacity at this point, and probably does not fully factor in everything that has happened in recent years in the same way. So, why do you want Hamaguchi on 17? I do too, but why do you? I just think he's done like a really good job on the 7R games in terms of not only getting them out the door, but making them play in the way that I think is a true modernization of classic FF for the most part. And that's not to say that it can't be better. It can definitely be better in like a lot of respects. But I think he is the only one kind of punching in the right direction right now. So I think E.T. Homerin, thank you so much for the tier 1. I appreciate it. How about those new first soldier chapters? Yeah. I didn't catch all of it yet. I basically only caught the end of the first soldier chapter. So I'm like behind. So I have to look into that. I feel like they are going to do something entirely new and won't keep re-trilogy combat. They don't have to necessarily keep re-trilogy combat so much as like I just want them to keep the basic idea of you hit an enemy and that builds up an ATB bar, and then you can open that ATB like command menu and select commands, and you can switch party members. That's really the only things that I want them to keep, and they can do literally anything else. They can make it feel different. They can add a jump button. Any other thing they want to do with it, they can do with it. It can basically make it feel completely different in a lot of ways. But I just want them to keep the core idea of you are charging an ATB bar and you use that to open a command menu, and of course you can switch party members. Anything else they want to add or subtract or play around with, if they don't want to keep the stagger bar again, they want to swap the stagger bar out for something else, if they want to do this, that, and the other, I'm so cool with it. Bring in something new. I just want them to keep the element of commands, and I want them to keep the element of multiple playable party members. And I think as long as they have those things, those basic things, and the feeling of like, you know, doing light puzzle solving while in combat and doing, you know, elemental weaknesses, that type of stuff. Basically, like the stuff that you expect from Final Fantasy gameplay, that while it changes from game to game on how it gets presented, it's still there. Like the core concepts are still there, right? Like I think about like Final Fantasy 12 and 13, and while there are a lot of people who don't necessarily like 12 and 13, 12 and 13 still have all of the like elements there in the combat system. They're still very much identifiably Final Fantasy in terms of the way that they work, in terms of their overall design scheme, even though they're radically, departures from the way past systems were presented, they still ultimately kind of aren't, especially 12. 12 is still, I mean, you could really argue that 12 isn't even a departure at all. It's just, you can literally just walk around and you don't have to hit the attack button anymore. But 12 is still very much identifiably FF to me, right? But they did a lot of interesting, cool things with 12 that added a lot to the overall formula of Final Fantasy, and that's all I want them to do, right? Which is why, when I present this idea to some people, and they always say like, oh, you just want more FF7. I'm like, no. I don't want it to be more FF7. I want it to just have a core identity that we all know of as Final Fantasy, that we can all point to and agree. And when you list these elements out, everyone is in agreement. Yeah, that's the thing. And you could do anything with those things, right? Like you could take a magic system anywhere. You can do anything with party members and how different party members play. You can do anything with status effects and elemental weaknesses and play around with them, right? Status effects in Final Fantasy X don't look the same as the ones in Persona. And using elemental weaknesses in Final Fantasy X doesn't look the same as it looks in something like Persona either, right? So it's like you can play around with that shit any way you want to and build a fundamentally new game. But as long as those core elements are there, I think it will ultimately feel like Final Fantasy. Is my nephew still playing FF7R? I don't know. I have to ask him. I haven't been over in a few weeks since I gave him the game. So when I go visit him again, we'll have an update on whether he's been playing the game or not. I hope he has. When I gave the game to him, I told him, I like literally sat him down and I'm like, let's play the bombing mission together. So I know he at least got through the bombing mission. I don't know if he got further than that. But he seemed to think it was pretty cool when he played the bombing mission. I don't know if he was just being performative for Unk or he genuinely thought it was cool. I don't know, man. I have said and continue to say that the 13 trilogy has the best boss fights in the entire franchise. Yeah, I would definitely say it's like at least like top 3 in terms of the boss fights that actually make use of the entire combat system and what tools it provides you. Now, how long it takes to get those tools and get through some of the very tanky normal encounters is another thing. Yeah, that's like the real problem with 13's combat is the fucking normal encounters. 13's combat is weird because it is a brilliant system on boss fights and somehow a terrible system on normal encounters. Like with normal encounters, I'm like, oh my god, this shit is like just enemies like that have fluffed out health and like you have to stagger them like multiple times. And even if you're doing 5 stars and you're playing optimally, it's still too fucking slow. But when you're in a boss fight and you're fighting fucking Barthandelus, it's like, dude, this fucking Final Fantasy 13's combat is awesome. Now, 13.2 got it right. 13.2 basically took everything about 13's combat and made it so much better, right? Like 13.2 does not have this same issue, with bloated mobs and stuff like that. It doesn't have it. The preemptive strike system in 13.2 also allows you to start the fights with buff and haste and like all these kinds of things so that you're able to get into these normal battles and they just go a lot faster and they just make better use of the system. And also 13.2 unlocks the whole battle system pretty much straight away. So 13.2 is just such a better system than the original 13. And it's actually kind of funny because I think while some people are really critical of 13's system, I think if 13 had all of the features that 13.2 has, maybe minus the Pokemon feature, but if the battle system opened straight away and it felt the same, people would really love it. Speaking of, there was a Final Fantasy 13 thing that I wanted to talk about, I guess. I thought. Is there not? Is it? Oh, is it in this interview? The screenwriter? Oh no, this is the gamer. Can we? Can we find the actual interview? We can. Hamaguchi tells me that the creation of this system Oh, let me back up. So this is about the creation of Final Fantasy VII Remake's hybrid system, and this is what Hamaguchi has to say about that. He was asked during the Brazilian Game Show 2025. Screenrant had the opportunity to sit down with Naoki Hamaguchi and talk a bit about his work on the remake trilogy as well as his influences. One of the most notable aspects of Re Trilogy is its revamped and renewed combat system. While the original game only offered turn-based combat, the new titles add real-time action mixed with turn-based elements. Hamaguchi tells me that the creation of this system doesn't stem from a single source of influence, and, in fact, leans on the Final Fantasy series rather than solely external sources. Okay, I have to pause for a second. Again, I don't think it is like forbidden for them to look at other games and say we're going to incorporate those ideas into FF7. I know this writer, by the way, I work with him on screen. That's funny. And by the way, I'm only using ad blocker because of whenever we do these article videos, ads, unfortunately, on these websites take up so much screen economy that I cannot actually like comfortably fit all the content on screen without having to use it. But anyway, what was I saying? Yeah. I do not think that it is, a sin for them to use influences outside of the Final Fantasy series. But with this being said, I also don't understand why so much stuff, like why the Final Fantasy series isn't used more often for inspiration for a lot of the modern titles, right? Like, I don't know. I think that they need to focus on actually modernizing and bringing up to date Final Fantasy and not trying to think about this genre and that genre and this is what's popular now and this is where things are moving and this is what we need to do in order to catch up. I think they just need to think about like what Final Fantasy games have traditionally been, and I don't think that they've actually been that different, right? If you look at Final Fantasy 1 through all the way up to 13, there is like a very consistent through line of common elements of what people consider Final Fantasy, right? Like, it is not like Final Fantasy has just always been, this completely random different thing. Even with 12 and 13, which were very experimental games, still a lot of the common FF elements were there, right? They changed them. They did different things with them in attempts to appeal to new people. And you can certainly argue back and forth on whether those things worked or not. But there is like a incredibly clear through line that you can look at and say, okay, this is what Final Fantasy games have traditionally done. And so I don't understand why they look at kind of like, say like 15 and 16, that they suddenly think that people just don't like the core aspects of Final Fantasy anymore. And I don't mean the core Final Fantasy audience either. I mean that I believe that Final Fantasy as it is can appeal to new people. Or not as it is, but like Final Fantasy, the core identity, the core experience of this being a party-based RPG with different characters that you can play as, and the way in which Final Fantasy has a unique way of moving throughout its worlds and exploring those characters and the types of systems that people expect. I think that they have not reached the cap of how many people really would enjoy those systems. And furthermore, their existing fans also still yearn for a return of games that feel that way. So I just don't understand why there is like this necessity to pursue so much external influence. Again, not to say that they can't use any external influence. They can definitely use external influence. It's just that I feel like a lot of that external influence sometimes comes at neglecting the Final Fantasy influence. And then, yeah, even with people saying like, oh, they need to make Final Fantasy 17 like Expedition 33. I don't think that Final Fantasy 17 needs to be like Expedition 33, but I do think it's funny because saying that Final Fantasy needs to be like Expedition 33 is basically just saying that Final Fantasy needs to be Final Fantasy, because Expedition 33 is literally just them copying Final Fantasy's homework. Like, that's all it is. All you're saying with that is just like, you wish the newer titles were more like classic FF. Like, that's all you mean. Like, it's not like a really profound statement to say that. That's like buying, like, I don't know, like, no, I don't want to use that analogy, but like, I don't know a good analogy for it, actually, come to think of it. But yeah, like saying that like Final Fantasy needs to be like E33 is, I get what you mean by that, but all you're really saying is that you just want the fucking world map back. And when you say I want it to be like E33, we're not getting the world map back faster by you saying that. We would get it back faster by you just saying, I want the fucking world map back from Final Fantasy. You know? So I don't think it's that you want Final Fantasy to be Expedition 33. I think you just want Final Fantasy to be FF, right? Like, you just want them to go back to their sauce. E33 is a love letter to a lot of old school JRPGs, but in particular, a lot of old school Final Fantasy games. And yeah, it's not that FF needs to copy E33. It's just that FF should do the FF thing, which is what E33 did, right? It also did the FF thing, but people want FF to do the FF thing too. Right? I think that's all that really is. So again, I do think our words matter. The devs do read what we say. The higher ups also read what we say. And we should send clear message. It's not that we want them to copy this small French studio, because, by the way, how fucked is that? Like, I think what people are actually asking for when they say that is a terrible thing. Like, they're asking for, like, let's suppose that Square did copy E33, right? Like, that would be like so fucked up, because it's like this big multi-billion-dollar corporation coming in and copying a small French studio and being like, yeah, we made our new thing. And I don't think that's not what people want. People just want but I get why people say it, but it's not the way we should communicate what they should do. Yeah, and that's another thing too, is that SE can't really copy Sandfall, because Sandfall was inspired by Squaresoft. You know what I'm saying? They were inspired by what Final Fantasy was doing previously, right? And they noticed that there really wasn't anything that was quite like FF7 through 10, so they decided to make their own game that was kind of a follow-up to that style of Final Fantasy, right? But like, Square wouldn't be copying E33 if they tried to do something like that. They would just be doing what they did, right? I don't know. Anyway, that's like that's like a really long rant on that I just feel like I had to talk about. I'm honestly over FF. First of all, thank you, Roy Mustang, for the super chat. Roy Mustang says, I'm honestly over FF. The only thing that can make me interested in 17 is if it is completely devoid of combat, with the central focus being on dialogue, choice, and consequence, like Disco Elysium. That would be incredibly fascinating. I don't think they'd ever do that, though, because that tends to not be the JRPG way of handling things. I do think that like some degree of choice and consequence could be really interesting, but I don't think like to the extreme degree of like a Western RPG. But I always said that if they ever wanted to make like a Final Fantasy game that had like dating sim aspects, I think that would actually go over well. I know some of you are going to kill me for saying that, but like I've seen it be like really popular in games like Fire Emblem and Persona and other games. I mean, even E33 to some extent. People with Metaphor were very upset that they couldn't romance a lot of the heroines in that game. I do think that's like a very popular thing. So I think if they were ever to like have some type of choice and consequence in the game, that would actually be really fun. Because Final Fantasy games usually tell fixed storylines, I think that choice and consequence could actually be really fun in side quests, right? So, let's just say like Final Fantasy 16, for example, if there were like different choices that Clive could have made in those side quests, and those choices could affect how those side quest storylines would play out, I think that would have been really interesting. Romance options? Okay, let me change your mind. Suppose we have Final Fantasy 15. And instead of being stuck with Luna Freya, you could just go romance Aranea. Right? Would that not? I think Metaphor is better by not having dating elements and instead having an implied canon romance subplot. I mean, okay, so the canon romance subplot ended up being like the girl that I was going to pick anyway. So it ultimately didn't matter. I kind of it kind of just ended up working for me. Um, which by the way is Yufa, like 100% of the way. You say RNA and I raise you Prompto because holy shit, the homoeroticism of him and Noctis at times made me pause in the game. But bro, yeah, that's what I'm saying though, right? Like, if there was any type of like choice and consequence that FF could work with, because I do think that like FF does have to tell a story that is like fairly fixed in a way. I do think that like one side quest or two romance options could potentially be a way in which you could have that happen and it still feel like Final Fantasy. And also too, I think that if anything, because I know some people say that romance options aren't JRPG, and I don't know where they got that from, because I'm like, dude, so many JRPGs have that nowadays, and not even nowadays, like before too. So, and they're really popular. They're really popular. Like so much of like Fire Emblem Three Houses' popularity was based on that. So I know like a lot of existing FF fans don't like it, but it's a super popular thing. Anyway, let's read the rest of the quote. Hamaguchi tells me that the creation of the system doesn't stem from a single source, and in fact leans on the Final Fantasy series rather than solely external sources. The foundation of it all is the original Final Fantasy VII, a turn-based game. However, we do draw inspiration from many action-based games that require you to think tactically about how you battle and position yourself, he explains. Hamaguchi goes on, the stagger system was pulled from Final Fantasy XIII. Curiously enough, Hamaguchi worked on Final Fantasy XIII. The game director acknowledges that the reason why the hybrid combat hybrid combat mechanics in Final Fantasy VII Remake Trilogy work well is because of Teruki Endo, the game's battle director. Most of Endo's career is centered around action-based games, cites Hamaguchi. For reference, Teruki Endo's first credited work is as a game designer on Resident Evil 5, though he isn't best known for working as the lead designer on 2018's. Though he is best known for his work as the lead designer. I'm so sorry. I can't read today. Though he is best known for working as the lead game designer on 2018 Monster Hunter's World, which is somewhat a tactical action. Okay, I'm going to try this sentence one more time. Fucking kill me. For reference, Teruki Endo's first credited work is as a game designer on Resident Evil 5, though he is best known for working as the lead game designer on 2018's Monster Hunter World. Okay, God, which is a somewhat tactical action-based RPG. In Capcom's game, you have to think thoroughly about the weapon type you're using, and more than anything else, timing and positioning. This can be seen in the Final Fantasy VII Remake Series 2, though to a smaller extent. Hamaguchi concludes that Endo's presence as the battle director for the remake trilogy is exactly what Square Enix's team needed. Quote, I believe that finding the balance between the original game's turn-based system with Endo's expertise in action-based combat is what made Final Fantasy VII Remake's combat system so beloved by players. Unk's eyes are cooked? No. I'm just I'm just dyslexic as fuck, and so I like my eyes. Well, I guess it is my eyes because yeah, they jump all over the place, and yeah, like I read words out of order and stuff like that really badly. So I have to like reread stuff multiple times. Late reply to an earlier post, but I don't think anyone has gotten down classic FF elements like Square ever. Like they're always missing something. There's a difference in combat feel, especially in E33's case. Yeah, for sure. I can definitely see that. What was I going to say? Yeah, I like FF2. So ultimately, you know, again, the whole point of this is that they really drew from Final Fantasy as a whole. They drew from Final Fantasy internally rather than seeking out a ton of external influence, which again is not bad at all. But I don't think that their primary like influences should be if we want to make a game like X game that is not even a Final Fantasy. I think that their influence and their motivation should always be that we are trying to make a Final Fantasy game and we're trying to evolve what Final Fantasy is. We may take influence from other titles in order to make Final Fantasy a better Final Fantasy thing. But we're not just going to like go into a completely different genre or emulate something that is definitely explicitly not FF. You know, I'm telling you, those elements are still really popular. People still really care about them. So, is there anything else regarding time management in certain sections? Oh, yeah. So this is about the kind of like padding in Rebirth and like whether Rebirth is padded or not and like what you can expect for part 3. To this, Hamaguchi replies, let's read the first paragraph first. Reflecting on how the hybrid combat system was built, Hamaguchi punctuates that he and Square Enix team have a clear vision of how the remake trilogy will proceed. While the games in this series have been praised, there is some level of criticism toward them. There are complaints about how the story differences in Final Fantasy VII Remake are handled, and how some portions of the game, like Costa del Sol, feel so long and drawn out. Really? Costa del Sol? Really? I mean, I guess. Yeah, somewhat. I can kind of see it. That's not like the part of like Rebirth that I feel like was like truly drawn out. Temple of the fucking Ancient is like the part that I feel like was drawn out. Like it just did not need to be this long. Holy crap. What are you doing? Temple of the Ancients Yeah, I was fine with Costa del Sol. I was a little surprised, but I can kind of see it because you have to go around playing all those mini games and things. I can kind of see it. But Temple of the Ancients, dog, that's where I like kind of like started to like lose my mind a little bit. It took everything in me to just like to not like deduct a little bit off of the game because of how long Temple of the Ancients was. And like a lot of it was just like the same handful of enemies in like a small area. Nah, the Cave of the Gi was bad. I don't think Cave. Well, my problem with Cave of the Gi was that like it was placed in such a fundamentally wrong section because it was like, yeah, Nanaki, shut the hell up. The Gi are talking now. So the pacing in that section was like a little weird. It did not leave like enough room to breathe. So to this, Hamaguchi replies, regarding time management in certain areas, in certain sections, especially in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, I honestly don't believe that they were longer than necessary. I feel like nowadays, players just have too much to do and too much to play. So they often feel that urge that something has to be concluded quickly. Even if he doesn't agree with the claims, the game director does mention that this feedback is being taken into account for the upcoming Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3. As we work on the conclusion to the trilogy, we are striking a balance on how the story arcs are told and spread out so as to ensure that the game feels a bit more concise. Yeah, I mean, like, he's not wrong when he says that, you know, players are, like, there's too much shit to play and people want stuff to conclude. And also that attention spans are shorter than ever. And so, like, a lot of stuff feels longer than it needs to be. It's also true that I do think that a lot of older, like, games, just in general, a lot of older RPGs were, like, a lot more snappy about how they got from point A to point B. So I think it's a combination of things for sure. I also like Hamaguchi that I don't know what way to say this, but I like that he has a strong spine. He's got a strong back on him. Because this isn't the first time I've seen him talk about this in interviews. Whenever he gets faced with like certain like creative choices and like stuff like that, he gets faced with criticism. He doesn't back down on like a lot of his decisions. He's very much like, no, this is what we wanted to do, and we did it, and I think it's the correct thing to do, and I believe in it. So he doesn't really falter. He doesn't backtrack. He doesn't say like, oh yeah, no, I regret that we did this. You're right. We have so much criticism. He's like, nope, we did it the way that we wanted to. We might take a look at it again in part 3 if we want to make it better in some way, but this is what we did. I think he's a cool guy. Hold on, are you saying that the Gi bit interrupts arguably a core impactful character defining moment from OG for the sake of pushing the big new thing or an action set piece or awful comedy? Rebirth wouldn't do that. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's kind of like if I was to make like, you know, a story criticism of Retrilogy, I do think that that's like been kind of the problem with a lot of the new story elements. It's not even necessarily whether a lot of them are necessarily bad or good. It's just that in many places, it feels like they ruin the original scene for the sake of like pushing in the new thing or like building up the new mystery, which I think is kind of fine for fans of FF7 who already know everything. But I think for new people experiencing FF7 for the first time, it can be jarring, and it can also not let those scenes have the room to breathe that they need in order to have the full effect. Like, I don't think the Naki scene or the scene with Barrett and Dyne are quite as effective in Rebirth as they are in the original, for sure. I have not met a single person who's an apologist for the Palmer fight. I think everybody agrees. Like I don't think that like I mean even like the biggest retrilogy stands that I've come across, all even they pretty much agree that the Palmer fight was just kind of a low point in like the trilogy so far because it was just like what the fuck. What are we doing here? Like, why the fuck is this happening? So I don't think anyone like would really defend the Palmer fight, and I would say that that to me was probably a low point in the trilogy so far. For like, it was a cool fight too. Actually, I actually really like that fight. By the way, it's actually a really good boss fight. I just wish it was placed somewhere differently. I don't think it was. I get people's issue, but it wasn't ruined for me. I mean, it was just like Palmer is such like a comic relief character, and to like place him immediately after that scene feels so wrongly placed because it's such a heavy scene, and like to have that like really heavy scene and then like Palmer being like a little goofball right next to it is just so does feel like pretty jarring and like distasteful to like a lot of people compared to like the original scene where all of that just didn't happen. The Palmer fight was great, but it happened at the wrong time. Place it where we fight Rufus in the gold saucer and it'd be perfect. Yeah. It was actually a really good fight and like brilliant set pieces like in general during the fight, like they always have. It's just like it's literally just a matter of placement of the fight. Like if you just placed it in a different fucking area, it would have been awesome. Like yeah, he literally smacks his ass. Yeah. And it's funny. You want Palmer to smack his ass, but you just don't want him to smack his ass after dying just like died. And I don't mean like just after. I mean like literally seconds, minutes after dying just died in the same fucking like zone. We're doing this like after he died, and that felt like that felt wrong for many reasons. Why not just have the Palmer fight at Rocket Town like it was in OG? Wait, they cut Rocket Town. Well, I think Rocket Town's coming back in part 3. Rocket Town has to come back in part 3, right? How the fuck do you do Sid's backstory without Rocket Town? I don't think you can. I think you have to have Rocket Town. Hamaguchi said, I think he did say that. I think you're right. I think he already has confirmed that Rocket Town's like gonna be in the third part. Yeah, they said it was originally in part 3, but it was cut. They said it was originally in Rebirth, but it's cut to part 3 for certain reasons. That makes sense. Well, okay, so I mean, like, imagine that you had Rocket Town in Rebirth. Like, where the fuck does it fit? I mean, I guess you could definitely fit it in because you fit it in the original, but the way that Rebirth is structured, I don't think Rocket Town. I don't think it, because if you're not gonna make Sid playable immediately after, then what's the point, right? Yeah, because the OG had Sid playable, after that portion. But like, if you don't have that in remake, and he's just like a guest character that shows up and he flies you around, you can't really have that big moment for him and then relegate him to not being a playable character, right? Because then what do you have for him in part 3? You have to have that exposition in Rocket Town with him and Shara. And then you get playable Sid, right? Like, you can't have that exposition first. But then also, like, if Rocket Town, like, was in Rebirth, like, if you wanted to hold that back, like the moments with him and Shara and like, you know, the rocket and all that shit, if you wanted to hold that back, you just wouldn't have anything to fucking do in Rocket Town. Like it would just be kind of pointless. So actually, I really get why they made that decision to hold Rocket Town back. That actually makes a lot of sense. I don't get the point of Sid in Rebirth anyways. Also, isn't Sid some sanitized version who for some reason has connections to Aerith, I guess? Yeah, the connections to Aerith stuff, I don't really know how I feel about that yet because we don't have part 3. He is different. Sid is not the same guy in Rebirth that he is in Final Fantasy VII OG. I have a theory about what they're going to do with Sid. I don't think that they're sanitizing him. I think they're setting Sid up for something that is going to be really interesting. I think that they are making Sid into a guy who seems kind of nice. And I think that when you get to Rocket Town and explore his character more in part 3, he is going to have moments where he is not nice and he is going to basically tell you to fuck off, more or less. Yeah. Rocket Town will be the mask off moment for Sid. It's when he's suddenly not nice and like he's suddenly like really like this like really angry man all of a sudden, and it's going to feel super jarring, and people are going to be like, "Yo, what the fuck?" By people, I mean like the main cast of characters. They're gonna be like, "What the fuck, Sid?" And that's going to make like the sit down and drink your goddamn tea moment even like better, because it's going to be like, "Holy shit, Sid went from like this nice, cool pilot guy to like this really angry man," and then you're going to learn about, you know, how Shinra basically fucked him. And then all of a sudden it's going to be like, okay. That's just like what I currently think that they're doing with it. I don't theorize too much on FF7R because I just don't know, man. And this shit can go any kind of way. You know, it's like the whole like remake versus sequel stuff. Like, I don't really like think too much about it anymore because I'm just like, let's just play the third part, bro, and then figure it out. That's a good point. Sid was being professional in Rebirth. He politely told Barrett to fuck off, and yeah, yeah, exactly, right. And then in like part 3, he's just gonna be a fucking asshole and just like, you're like, you know what, fuck you. The way it felt to me when I played Rebirth was this new Sid is the Cage version of him, not the FF7 version of him. That's a very valid point, I think. It does feel like the Cage version of him, which is a lot nicer, a lot more palatable. But yeah, I do want him to be angry, and I want him to use profanities at me in the third part, because if he doesn't, then that's not Sid. And then last bit, I think we can talk about Hamaguchi's influences. He says, I really enjoy playing video games, and many titles influence my work. I've always enjoyed the Witcher series, as well as the Fable franchise. Most recently, Hamaguchi had to pause his playthrough of the renowned Ghost of Yotei due to work trips, but he states, I can't wait to get home to continue playing it. The titles resonate directly with how he sees action-based games, and it's no wonder that this system partially applied to Final Fantasy VII Remake. As mentioned, Final Fantasy VI is the product that inspired Hamaguchi to pursue game development, and it undeniably holds a place near and dear to his heart. Both it and Final Fantasy VII are well known for their amazing cast of characters, but even more so their unforgettable villains. Kefka and Sephiroth set the standards for how villains should be written in and outside of gaming. Now Hamaguchi has the honor of working on Sephiroth. I asked him who his favorite villain was between the two in the series, given his connection to them. He enthusiastically and swiftly responds, Sephiroth with all certainty. The Final Fantasy VII Remake is the largest project now in Naoki Hamaguchi's career, so it comes as no surprise that it and the most iconic character have stolen his heart. Very good read. Even in Cage, he was rude though, toned down, but he was a bit uppity towards Sora. Yeah. I still prefer Kefka, probably because he hasn't been done to death over and over again like Sephiroth. Yeah, I can see that. I can definitely see that. Sid struck me to have the same warm friendliness towards Cloud and the others that he did in Advent Children. That being said, in Advent Children, there are comrades who fought a prior battle together. So I did think that was kind of weird. I mean, I think that like Sid's personality is basically what you expect it to be at kind of a later point, I guess, in the Final Fantasy VII chronology. I don't think that Rebirth was so much like not Sid as like it's just not the Sid that you expect at that point in FF7's story, which makes it feel like, is this even Sid, you know? But I do think that think and hope that, you know, the plan is, of course, to get Sid to what we expect of Sid. Rebirth Sid feels like the Sid with the character development he hasn't even been through yet. Yeah. But again, yeah, my hope is that it is all a setup for a mask off moment when we get to Rocket Town, and then Sid is like, shut up and drink your goddamn tea. And then they're like, is this the same fucking Sid? Like, what the fuck? He's so angry. He's so mad. Like, what is wrong with him? And then we kind of get like, yo, this guy's kind of fucked up. And then they get the exposition on him and he joins the party, and yeah, the rest is history. There are many tricks they can do to show us the old Sid with this new Sid. Yeah. So I'm not doomer on Sid right now, because I don't think that they are doing that for it to just be like as it is now and not have him crash out like super hard and be more like the iconic Sid that we all know and love. Especially when I don't think that there is a single character that I think that they have butchered in any capacity so far. I think that every character has been pretty on point for the most part. I don't really have much complaints about the characters. If anything, I would say they're like the shining beacon of Final Fantasy VII Trilogy, is that they actually have recreated all these characters in their original likeness and form to a great degree of accuracy, right? So it's one of the great triumphs of Re-Trilogy so far. So I don't think that they're going to fumble a character like Sid that's so iconic and I don't want to say hard to mess up, but like they have enough there to be able to build off of. I don't like the voice for Red, even though some people like it. So, I mean, the voice for Red is like really jarring for some people, like the true voice for him. But it is one of those things that was always there, but because you're reading the dialogue, right? And because you're reading it, you never have to be like, oh my God, like that's actually what he sounds like, you know? It's just kind of implied that, oh yeah, he's actually way younger than we thought. Nanaki's voice change, I think, is supposed to be jarring. Yeah, it is supposed to be jarring. Yeah. And it's the perfect showcase of Max Mittelman's ungodly range. Yeah, it's so insane. Yeah, so it is supposed to be that basically this kid is like pretending to be like this old man, right? Like this sage wisdom old man. And he is doing that so that you actually take him seriously, because you can't really tell what the age of someone of his species is. Yeah, Red was ultra jarring. I knew it was coming, but I didn't expect it to be so drastic. Like the Tidus laugh, it's supposed to be cringe, yeah. For me, more so, it was the personality change. He was so different after Cosmo Canyon. Yeah, I mean, and that's in part because he was stopped pretending to be something that he wasn't. I think that if we want to take this through like a more literary lens, maybe, or like a more analytical lens, let's say, we could say that there's a thematic parallel between Nanaki and Cloud, right? This whole idea of like, I'm putting on this show, I'm being someone that I'm not, in order for you to think things about me that I wish I was, or that I wish I had, or for you to take me a certain way. And so I think that there is kind of this beautiful parallel between Cloud's story and the Nanaki story. And that, you know, Nanaki thematically is like, you know, like showing thematically what, you know, kind of the broader story for of FF7 is, like the broader themes of it and about identity, right? Yeah, it foreshadows Cloud in a way. And just in the same way that the party ultimately ends up accepting Nanaki for who he was after it comes out, like, listen, this is not my real name. It's not my real voice. I'm actually not like this like wise old sage. I'm really a young kid. Yes, my voice sounds like Ryuji from Persona 5, etc. Right? But it's a good moment. It's a really good moment, and it connects to Cloud's story in such a profound way. Such a profound way. I was expecting that to happen. I was sort of expecting that to happen is Cosmo Canyon, and I had honestly forgotten his real voice in Costa del Sol because I was so stunned by the clear materia. But in OG, when he is around in Buchenhagen, I heard a voice like his real one in Rebirth. You know, it's so funny because I had forgotten about like the scene with him and Aerith in the hotel in room too, and I was like, when you first play through it and you hear another voice in there, and you're like, dude, who the fuck was that? And then you get to Cosmo Canyon, and then you hear Nanaki sound like that, and then especially if you go back and you do New Game Plus, and you're playing it again, and you're like, oh fuck, that was Nanaki. That's how he sounds. I actually kind of like that. The scene with Nanaki and Aerith in the hotel, and you overhear them, and yeah, he trusted Aerith the most. Yeah, I actually like the kind of connection that they end up having in this remake. I kind of feel like that's also been like one of the bigger triumphs of the re-trilogy in terms of their characters too, is that I do feel like the interpersonal relationships between each characters has just gotten better. Each character and their relationship between each other is a lot more intimate and a lot more trusting, and it develops all in a supernatural way. I mean, as in a really natural way, not a supernatural way. Super space natural, not supernatural one word. You know what I mean? There is something really cute how Nanaki let the mask drop around Aerith. Even if their future knowledge was lost, they didn't lose the connection said knowledge gave them. Right. And another thing that you have to think about too is that in part 1 of Remake, where Aerith like touches Nanaki, and then like he gains some sort of knowledge or enlightenment from her doing that, and it immediately calms him down. And then we don't know exactly what Aerith did in that moment, but it seemed to make him be like, oh, okay, cool. And also too, it also made him and Aerith share some sort of knowledge, like at the core of like whatever she did when, you know, she touched him and he calmed down. It made him aware of things that he was not aware of previously, whether those are the future memories or anything. He somehow became a lot more knowledgeable and calm and trusting and felt connected to them in a more immediate way. What's also interesting too is that he does this exact same thing to Marlene. I mean, not he does it. I mean, Aerith does it. Aerith does that exact same thing to Marlene in part 1. So Marlene also maybe has some sort of either future knowledge, or Marlene was gifted in some capacity. I don't know. But it is really interesting to think how that's going to play a role for Marlene. And I do wonder, Marlene never went through this singularity and she knew Aerith wasn't there. Yeah, so Marlene does seem to have like this sort of power now based on whatever Aerith did to her, and now she's aware of the other worlds. And she's aware of Aerith being in danger, right? Because basically Marlene in another timeline, another reality world, whatever you want to call it, I guess the developers call it worlds, so let's use the term worlds. But Marlene in another world knew that Aerith was in danger. And it does feel like maybe Marlene knew that because of some type of power or something that she was gifted from Aerith. I wouldn't really say that I'm like, I'm not really much of an FF7 theorist, but there does seem to like really be some sort of connection there. So that's good. That's going to be a really interesting point. Barrett and Yuffie's pseudo dad and daughter relationship was charming also, and Tifa and Aerith were like sisters to Yuffie. Yeah. The relationships there feel really natural, and they feel closer. I think that like one thing that all JRPGs tend to aim for is that JRPGs all kind of share this common theme of found family, right? So you're supposed to go on this incredible journey with this group of characters who are basically kind of like, in a lot of games, they're like either degenerates or they're outcast, or they don't really fit in with their society in some capacity, right? And through each other, they find this bond, this family, this second family, and they grow close, and then the characters ultimately become friends. They're like the most unlikely group of friends. They come from all around the world in this fictional world, and they all have different skill sets, and they're very different people with different backgrounds, but somehow they learn how to get along and be friends. And like whatever war is going on, whatever religious stuff is going on, they figure out how to work together. And that's kind of like the core thematic thing that happens in most JRPGs. Josh Z, thank you so much for the super chat. We should have seen the red voice coming, because the first thing Era says is, "This child is a friend when he breaks free." Holy shit, did she say that? Josh Z, I kind of want to bring the scene up now. But that's actually really fucking cool. Holy shit. That's awesome. I love that. Midnight Sapphire, thank you so much for the tier 1. Thanks for being with us for 50 months. God damn. Do you think an older Denzel and Marlene might be playable right after part 3? You mean like in a DLC? Or like what do you mean? Like as in like a 7 remake part 4? They do part 4. Yeah, I think they should make Marlene the main character of part 4. I could see Marlene playable the same way Aerith, flashback Aerith is. That would actually be good. That would actually be good. Playable Chatley in the DLC. Episode Chatley. Yeah, I mean, FF7 Rebirth's theme was Bond after all, right? And I mean, yeah, like Bonds are always a core theme in JRPGs for sure. I think that Rebirth did such an incredible job of that, though. But I think it's also why, seeing, say, 16 and Rebirth back to back, it did kind of make me double down on like Final Fantasy has to have party members. Like we do have to have party members. Like they do have to be playable and they do have to be like really central to the story because I do feel like in the absence of party members, especially playable, it's really hard to give them their flowers, so to speak, and like really appreciate them and really have that time to bond with them and have their complete story arcs without them being playable characters. And at that moment, that's kind of when I felt like, okay, I truly 100% feel like, yeah, Final Fantasy has to have multiple playable characters. Like, we can't be without this. Even 15 took the feedback and made the DLC versions of Prompto, Ignis, and Gladio playable. Yeah. And I think, like, especially, like, in the DLCs, like 15 really did not feel complete without those DLCs. And a big part of the reason that it didn't is because you didn't get those arcs, right? Those character arcs because you couldn't take the control away from Noctis and let it be about the other characters, and you couldn't let the narrative focus be on them in that way, right? Like I think if you're going to have a boss fight and that boss fight is going to be around, say, like, let's say Gladio's character arc, then Gladio needs to be playable and you need to be able to do stuff as Gladio. Otherwise, it's not going to hit the same, right? So I do think that in order for, you to really have that feeling of this is my found family in this game, I think that actually you do have to have those characters playable and they do have to get their moment to shine. So his DLC is his character arc, right? And that's kind of the issue too with the base game versus after is that with the base game, none of the characters have arcs except Noctis, right? His bros are just there to be like just servants, more or less, right? They don't get as much fleshing out until those DLCs, and then you're able to like really look at them in another way. And then of course the Brotherhood anime also really helps with this. But without the Brotherhood anime and without those DLCs, and we're just looking at the base game, it's really rough to see those characters as fully fleshed out, unfortunately. Which is a shame because if you consume all the media, I think that 15's cast is actually really likable. In fact, like 15's cast is so weird because they're so likable that it was just utterly disappointing that there was just nothing about them. You know what I'm saying? There just was not enough information and they kept trying to pump out supplementary media, and it's just like, no, the core game itself is broken in how it presents all this, right? And so what ends up happening is that it feels like Final Fantasy 15, the main game, is actually the conclusion to the Final Fantasy 15 universe rather than like the actual main course. It feels like it's the conclusion to everything you saw in Kingslave and Brotherhood and the supplementary material, rather than just being like, oh, this is like the main thing. '15 is actually the game that would benefit the most from like a revisiting for sure. There was that rumor that had came out that basically said that essentially what the rumor was is that they would remake Final Fantasy 15. It's more of like a remaster, a rework, and essentially like they were trying to make the battle system resemble more of Final Fantasy 7 remakes. Obviously, the rumor was not true, but I'm kind of sad that it's not. I'm kind of sad that it's not because I'm like, damn, I fucking wish, God, do I wish. Like, that's actually the type of remake that I think would be so beneficial and so cool and like add so much. And I would be about it, bro. I would turn into fucking Barry immediately. For those who know what Barry is, I would turn into Barry immediately. And yeah, the battle system in 15 is fine, sir. Respectfully, respectfully, sir. Uh, yeah, respectfully. We need a 13 remaster before anything else. I mean, yeah. The battle system for anyone not named Noctis is fine. So true. So true. Because if you play as like Ignis or Gladio, that shit is actually kind of tight. Like, not gonna lie. But if you play as Noctis, it sucks. And I actually do like what sucks so much is that like once the character swap DLC dropped, the team actually got better at making action games. And it's really funny because each character basically plays like their own game. And it's really cool because, you know, that's kind of like what Versus was aiming for a little bit. But the consequence of that is that every character plays better than Noctis, and Noctis is severely underpowered. Severely underpowered, right? Because the other three characters are broken and they play so much better because all the experience that the team got making Noctis, they ended up like making the other characters work like a trillion times more smoothly, have more interesting mechanics. And yeah, Noctis was probably getting an update with that DLC. That was like, I think that was the rumor that after they finished episode Noctis, they were going to basically like go back and revamp the core Noctis gameplay so that Noctis was as interesting to play as all the other characters. Man, dude, I'm so sad because basically what happened means that Final Fantasy 15 got left unfinished like 3 times, right? The first time when Versus 13 was canceled. The second time when Final Fantasy 15 released way earlier than it should have, like in terms of like the actual development time, which was 3 years. And the third time was when they canceled the DLC. So it really feels like FF15 got canceled 3 times. And it just like every time, dude, every time I'm like, this game feels like it is just so cursed beyond belief. The fact that it had a 10-year dev cycle is wild. Well, there were a lot of things that happened that fucked Versus over, right? So, one of the things that probably prevented us from getting Versus outright probably is like the thing that really destroyed Versus more than anything was Final Fantasy 14 1.0, I would say. Final Fantasy 14 1.0 basically made them have to pull the staff off of Versus in order to work on fixing 14 1.0. And because of that, Versus basically stalled in development because that team was all hands on deck in terms of fixing that game. And that ended up probably delaying the project by 2 years. And in that time, basically, they just like went in circles about ideas and other stuff. And I think that's why a lot of stuff changed in between that time because Versus was just stalling. And so, yeah. Noct underpowered. Noct can one-shot every enemy in the game with the ring, and his final version of his limit break is also stronger than the Chocobros. Yeah, but like, if you unlock character switching mid-game before you get the ring in Chapter 13, then Noctis becomes more powerful than them. But also the ring isn't fucking fun to use because it's so broken that it literally just kills everything, and it just, to the point of where it like it's not even playing the game anymore. It's just like it literally just feels like cheating. So I mean, technically, yeah, you're right, but it fuck, dude, it's like it's the worst combat in the fucking series, probably. I'm just gonna be honest. It was definitely the worst fucking combat that FF has ever had. Like, I don't think that anyone would like push back on that either. It just sucks. Like, nothing about it feels good. Like, it's so bad. It's so bad, dude. I mean, yeah, it's lore accurate for sure, but like using that ring crashed the game during the longest dungeon and I never went back to complete it. God damn. Dude, it's so broken, man. It's For the record, I said fine, not God tier. I don't even think it's fine if I'm honest. I think it is like, I think at best it is okay, and at worst it is like actively bad in many cases. If I'm like completely being honest. Like there are points where it is just like this is like actively not good. And then there are also times where I'm like, it's okay. But like at best, it has moments where it's like it's okay. But like during like most combat encounters, I'm like, dude, this fucking sucks. I'm like, I'm sorry. This is bad. I'm like, this is like actively bad. Like, I don't know. Like, you know how like most games have like this like flow state that you go into, and like you're like perfect dodge, parry, like, attack, doing a combo, right? Like, like a lot of action games have like a good flow state that you can go into with how you're chaining things together and you're using your skills and you're comboing and stuff like that. And you're like really like kicking the enemy's ass. There is never a moment like that in 15's combat. I feel like maybe it's a skill issue. You guys tell me. But I never feel like I'm actually like, I never feel like I'm going into any kind of flow state with the combat. I always feel like you just fumble through it, right? Because the enemy telegraphs are ass, right? And then they're either ass where they're like the enemy just randomly does an attack, or they are ass in the sense of like the enemy gives you like 30 seconds to hit the square button, like a long ass time. You have all the time in the world to hit the square button and do a parry. And so it is either the enemy just attacks you and then you have to potion spam and heal, or you just have all the time in the world to counter. And so you're just constantly kind of like doing this thing where you go between holding the attack button and holding the dodge button, and it never feels like the attack telegraphs are correct or anything. And or like if they're either too long, like I said, hold, or they're too short. And there's never any like, there are no well-designed mechanics to the fights. Like they're literally just like you hold sometimes and then you hold the other button sometimes, and then you just kind of fumble your way through the combat, and then also you can use the abilities and stuff like that. But it never feels like the combat is actually like coming together to be like this thing. It always just feels like the combat is just fumbling along. Like it never has like this moment where it's like, oh, this is like the correct way to play the combat for like peak enjoyment and for peak optimal play. It just feels like, what the fuck am I doing? I'm also a lot better gamer since I last touched 15. I feel like I'm just better at like timing and stuff. So maybe if I go back, I can like I can like really figure that out and I'll feel differently about 15. If you play FF15 Comrades alone, you'll discover a better flow state. I beat that shit solo, and it was a far better experience in FF15 from a gameplay standpoint. Really weird. No, no, no. You're not actually alone in that. A lot of people felt the same way about Comrades. People were like, why does Comrades play better than Final Fantasy 15 main game? I do think Comrades was a great big swing, though. Like, that was actually like a really cool moment. Comrades was amazing. Like it was actually a really fun DLC. Of course, it had a lot of problems that base 15 had. It had problems with how long it took to find people to play with and some other stuff, and or not how long it took to play or find people, because there were plenty of people at launch, but it was like the problem kind of was that it took a long time to load in the stuff, and then when you loaded into it, it was like you beat the mission and you couldn't just keep going from mission to mission with the same party. I think you had to like rejoin up with them again for the next mission. So I still remember the last time you streamed 15, you did none of the quests, were under level, never bought new gear, got through the entire game spamming warp strike and potions. Good game design. Oh yeah, that was like 3 years ago, I think, and it's so funny because they basically left the game on PC so that it has a memory leak, and you have to close the game every so often. Like if it's been running for 2 or 3 hours, you should close it and then reopen it. So the build is also unstable and unstable, and you have to like you have to like kind of manually fiddle with it in order to get it to like not basically like crash your system because of the memory leak over time. But yeah, that was really funny because we beat the game in 14 hours from beelining it. I do want to replay 15 again. That was like 3 years ago. I do want to play through it again, and this time I want to like actually do some of the side quests and buy new gear and stuff. But yeah, we did a playthrough where we didn't buy any gear. We just like basically didn't engage with like any of the RPG stuff like whatsoever. I think the only thing we did was like get some new abilities whenever they came up. But would you do an essay on 15 like you did with KH1? I absolutely would. Absolutely. FF15 10 years later. Oh, you're right. Dude, that's the fucking title. FF15 10 years later. Let's go. That's the title. Was like, oh man. I've thought about doing a thing too where like I did like the complete versus timeline, like versus the 15 timeline, where it was like basically a documentary on everything from like 2006 all the way to like 2019. So 13 years of Final Fantasy versus 15. But then as I started thinking about it, I was like, that would be a 2-hour video. And I'm like, I don't know if I have it in me to do that. A 2-hour video with an insane amount of research and an insane amount of like of editing with limited footage. And I'm like, oh my god, fuck, dude. I'm sure we would do like so well. It would probably get like 200,000 or 300,000 views. I feel like if I did it, like it'd probably be one of the most successful videos I've ever uploaded. But I'm just like, fuck, that's so much work. It would basically take me an entire month to make that video, and I do not know if I have that in me. Like it would basically take it a month. Make it a mini series. That's an idea. But mini series though on YouTube aren't as hot as they used to be. I fucking hate it too because years ago you used to be able to do like a mini series on YouTube and it was great. But nowadays it feels so unoptimized algorithmically because what you're supposed to do is just like one big upload. That is the way to optimize on YouTube, which is why you don't really have series anymore on YouTube. And instead, what you have is a creator uploading like a 90-minute video on something. But yeah, back in my day, we used to make a series, and you'd upload like 5-10 minute videos on something, do it weekly, and people would follow the series, and then it'd be like, oh shit, it's a new upload on such and such. They did the next part. But no one wants parts anymore, guys. It's the Netflix era where you binge. And even Netflix is not doing that shit anymore because Netflix realized that it's better to keep people that way for retention. I played FF15 for the first time over the pandemic, and it was perfect for that. I had all the time in the world. It had major issues in how it told its story, but it stayed with me. Credit where credit's due. I look back fondly despite its flaws, unlike some FFs. Strangely enough, despite everything I'm saying about FF15, I would not say it's my least favorite Final Fantasy at all. I would actually say it's not my favorite. But I still have like this weird unexplainable fondness of like for Final Fantasy 15. It is not a like in an objective sense. It is not like a great game per se. Like it's not like there is even a single thing I can point to in Final Fantasy 15, honestly, and say, "Oh, that's really good game design." At most, like most of FF15, I would say is like really okay game design, right? Like it's not like stellar in any capacity. And I can't really say any of the writing either is like, there's nothing I can really point to and say, oh, that's really good writing. In fact, most of the stuff in FF15, I can't even point to and say that's really okay writing. For the most part, like most of it is like, at worst, like I mean, at best inoffensive, and like at worst, like actively bad. Um, yeah, there's just like a lot of stuff wrong with FF15. Yeah, there's this weird heart to it almost. It does. It has like this. It has this fucking soul, dude. It has soul. It. There was actually a tweet I saw the other day that said, "Can a video game that is basically like not good have soul?" Which is like a really abstract question and concept. But I would actually say that Final Fantasy 15 is that game somehow in like a really weird way. It is somehow the most soulful like medium okay video game ever. It has soul somehow. There is actually heart to this game, even though it kind of fucking sucks actually. There are like genuine traces of geniusness to 15 where it's like, damn, that was a really good idea, and then it just like completely fucking fumbled. And yeah, I do think that Versus is kind of like the reason that it still kind of has that soul, because there was just so much soul that seemed to be going into Versus. But yeah, like it has like this hard to quantify heart and charm to it that is something that really stays with you, even though it is like it sucks in a lot of ways, if I'm honest. Okay, listen, it's to the point of where if you ask me, do you like Final Fantasy 15? I will say yes. And if you ask me, do you hate Final Fantasy 15? I'll also say yes. That's the only way I know how to explain my relationship with this game. But also like it's okay to love a bad video game. I know like there's definitely like Twitter soy boys that would be like, well, if you love a game, that automatically means you think it's good. So then it's not bad. And I'm like, no, it's bad. I know it's bad. I just like it. It's different. Like you can know it's bad and you can play it and you can be like, yeah, it's bad. I know it's bad. I actually wish it was good, to be honest. Like I do wish that they would like do the whole 15 like remakester that they were talking about. Like if FF15 got a near replicant level overhaul to its combat and story, oh fuck, dude. Oh my god, near replicant or like Crisis Core reunion like level upgrade, like not so much visually. I near replicant, yeah, Crisis Core as well because Crisis Core got like a gameplay overhaul on top of its visual overhaul. So if it got that level of fucking, you know, overhaul, it'd be awesome. Yeah, there's a lot of games with heart that are badly flawed games. OG Nier wasn't a mechanically good game. Yeah, but I think at the end of the day, you can say that OG Nier was still a phenomenal story and a phenomenal like concept and everything. But 15, I don't think is like a phenomenal story. I think that 15 again, this goes back to Bonds. This goes back to Bonds because I think that 15 nails maybe the thing that is most important to the soul of an FF game, even though everything, like literally everything else about it is bad. And that is at the end of the day, I believed and loved the boys. Like I believed that they had like a true bond between each other. And it was a bond good enough to kill God. And I think that their relationship was sold to me in a way that I still got on with pretty well. And I liked them enough to carry the experience for me, right? And so when you look at the story just being about, you know, the campfire and hanging out with the bros and eating ramen with them and shit, eating cup noodle. And when you think about that being the experience, then somehow 15 does come out to be this game where it's like, fuck, dude, I do actually kind of like, you know, there is something in my heart that like ultimately resonates with this, even though again, it does kind of feel like a schmedium okay at best video game in most regards. 15 has the best party banter. Okay, let's talk about this actually because I do think that like post 15 party banter in FF has been on the downhill like so hard. Like 15 had the like most iconic party banter in the series, and like why the fuck did like especially 16 just like give the fuck up on that like altogether? Like the boys would like talk about stuff and have like these dynamic conversations with each other. Why did that go away? Why did they just stop? Because again, 15 doesn't have like a lot of conversations, like a lot of cutscenes in general. It's actually a very like cutscene light game. There's only like a very small number of like really heavy story scenes in that game compared to other FFs or other story heavy RPGs. So a lot of it is kind of carried by these conversations that they'd have in the car and other places. I really don't get why, you know. Yeah. 15 has flaws, but it has the heart that IMO 16 lacks. 16 is IMO a nobody of what FF is. I mean, yeah, I would say that 15 is an infinitely more flawed game than 16. Like, let's just be real. But I do think that you're right that it does have like a type of Final Fantasy heart and core to it that I do feel like was kind of lacking in 16, but and that core really does just end up being the party members. Like that's like really what it is. It really is that yes, 16 is by most measures a significantly better game, but like when it comes down to it, it does not have that core thing, which I really do think is bonds. I really do think it's the party members coming together. Now, like, because like one thing I defended about 16 before the game released is that I was like, well, I think that 16 will be okay without playable party members because as long as the characters talk a lot, as long as they interact a lot, and as long as like we constantly have them with us as guest party members, I think it'll ultimately feel okay. But I don't think that ended up being the case for me. I really do think that FF is a game about bonds at the end of the day. And those bonds being strong enough to overcome anything. Now, I know what some people are going to say. Isn't that just a JRPG? And you are right to a large extent. That is what JRPGs are about. But also, that's still also what Final Fantasy 16 is about, right? It just doesn't have the actual thing to back it up. You know, it's kind of like a conversation I was having the other day on Twitter where I was saying, like, you know, people will say, like, okay, party members are part of FF. But, like, every JRPG has party members. So party members aren't really, like, a unique feature. Okay, yeah, sure. Like, that's true. But, like, okay. Even though that is true, Zelda games have puzzles in them, right? Could it be a Zelda game without puzzles? You'd be like, fuck no, it's not a Zelda game without puzzles. It would be like, maybe like a mediocre action game or something, but it cannot be a Zelda game without puzzles. But then, like, if you were to, like, to basically, like, Final Fantasyify this conversation, the way, like, it is in FF discourse, someone would be like, well, Resident Evil also has puzzles. So Zelda's puzzles aren't special. Even the Warrior spinoffs have puzzles for Zelda. It's funny. Yeah. Right? So you wouldn't be like, oh, hey, like, because Resident Evil, you wouldn't say that puzzles aren't a core part of Zelda just because Resident Evil also has puzzles. And plenty of other games have puzzles. So there's nothing unique about puzzles. So puzzles aren't part of the Zelda identity, right? It's like, that's not true. Puzzles are part of Zelda's identity, right? And we can go even further and say that there are Zelda puzzles and there are Resident Evil puzzles, and they are not the same. Zelda puzzles do not feel like Resident Evil puzzles, and vice versa. Zelda puzzles are unique to Zelda. And the way those game mechanics reinforce that are different. Zelda has its own brand of puzzles. Resident Evil has its own brand of puzzles. Yes, Final Fantasy has party members. Persona has party members. But a party member in Persona does not fucking feel like a party member in Final Fantasy. It's different. It's completely different. They have their own way of implementing that and reinforcing it through the narrative and through gameplay mechanics. And so, because of that, even though you can say Persona games reinforce the power of friendship, very true. Final Fantasy games reinforce the power of friendship, and they both do this through party members. The way in which they do that through the party members feels different in the game. There's something unique to the way they approach it. And so because of that, even if on the surface it is the same thing, even if beneath the surface it's kind of the same thing, it can still be part of that identity ultimately, right? The recipe doesn't necessarily become not part, or something doesn't necessarily become not part of the recipe just because, you know, cake and brownies both share like multiple different things. Can we get a video on this stream's title? Yeah. Yeah, I could probably cut multiple videos out of this stream. I feel are we still gonna play Trails today? Damn, I feel like we're past the time for playing Trails. Maybe I might do like an impromptu stream throughout the week so we can get two play sessions of Trails in. If not, but they'll definitely pick it up. I guess we yapped too much about this news shit and got carried away. So, I rarely get a chance to say this, and you bring up Zelda puzzles gives me a great chance. The Water Temple in Ocarina of Time is one of the best designed dungeons in all of Zelda, with some of the best dungeon-wide puzzles that make you take the entire layout into consideration to solve it. The only issue is equipping the iron boots on the N64 version is slow. I actually agree. If it wasn't for like the equipping and unequipping shit that makes it like that tanked the speed of doing it, I actually think that the Water Temple was otherwise fine and interesting. I prefer your content when it's scripted. No, you prefer me scripted? That's fine. That's fine. I can't blame you for if you feel that way. I think I'm actually better unscripted personally. Like as I go back and like whenever I make videos out of the stream, I feel like they're more fun to watch when it's unscripted. I think my scripted content is better when I'm doing stuff like the KH1 video. Both are great. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think my scripted NSP is better when I'm doing like the KH1 content. But I can't blame you for preferring scripted content because I put a lot of thought into that, and this is just me yapping. That's something I actually really like about DQ. They have a party talk function where you can have dialogue with every party member that constantly changes after minor and major story moments, even if the PC player character themselves doesn't talk. There's a ton of optional character development for those that want it. FF should do something similar. Yeah, for sure. NSP is great unscripted, but his essay videos like the God of War Winter Peak. You know, it's so crazy because like basically all of my friends are like, that God of War video you did is like your best work ever. And like nobody watched it. It's like one of the least viewed videos on the entire channel. And I'm like, fuck. Everyone's like, yo, like literally this is your best fucking video. This is like the best shit you've ever said. And like nobody watched it, and I was so sad, but I kind of expected it to. But what God of War video? If you search Night Sky God of War, you should find it. Love the Cage video. Oh, thanks so much. The party chat in DQ4 actually reveals some somewhat hidden characters. You can find the mother of the hero in DQ4 after beating the final boss, thanks to the party chat. Wow, that's cool. I'm a great yapper. I am. It's actually very funny because in real life, I feel like I'm very quiet. Like I don't have anything to say. But if you get me talking about like the right shit, I basically dominate the whole conversation. Honestly, a form of party talk for FF is sort of in rebirth with some optional dialogue, choice talks kind of. Yeah, and like. So like another thing too that I think is really important is just like because there's not like a large selection of AAA JRPGs, right? So I think kind of the core functionality of Final Fantasy in the broader AAA industry is to be like, because most JRPGs are not super high budget, this is what a high budget JRPG looks like. Yeah, I'm like 90% of my off-camera videos are scripted. So if you see me, it's usually not scripted. If you don't see me, it's scripted. And so because of that, I think that because Final Fantasy is like one of the very few, if not like the only like high budget AAA art JRPG, at the very least, it is the highest budget JRPG. If you're not counting like Monster Hunter, which is kind of a different thing because it's multiplayer and that sort of thing. But for the most part, it's the highest budget JRPG, right? And so I think that even things that seem like very trivial JRPG things are still like super important for Final Fantasy, right? Some people will say that party members are trivial, or like status effects or elemental weaknesses are trivial, etc., right? And maybe they are in a sense. But I also think that like Final Fantasy is like the only JRPG that a lot of people play, right? Travis, don't worry about it, man. I don't take any offense to that whatsoever. It's like I know that people have preferences for that stuff. So that's why I try to make both, like scripted and unscripted content, because I think that there's room for both. So no worries, bro. I don't take it offensively at all. I'm just glad you like something I do. So I think that there is inherently a value in, you know, some of those JRPG things, which again, to like the super core JRPG audience doesn't really mean much, but to the super casual audience, that is the only game that's like that. That is unique to the series, and it has like a importance. But also too, like there are not many AAA games where you have a fully fleshed out party, right? In fact, I'm trying to think about AAA games where you do have a full party system. There are some, but it is not a very large amount, right? Like, sure, you can say like Baldur's Gate 3, which Final Fantasy is also heavily rooted in D&D, but it's like there's not like a ton of AAA games that do that. And like you got to remember that the normie audience, a lot of them are only playing those kind of big AAA games. Now that's kind of changing a little bit with like a lot of big titles that are AA and AAA, like Silk Song and Expedition 33. And I mean, well, with Expedition 33, people are already comparing that to Final Fantasy because it feels cinematic and high fidelity enough to compare it to Final Fantasy's heyday. But so I think a lot of those attributes of Final Fantasy that to maybe the JRPG enthusiast feels somewhat vanilla, or feels like it's not like the most groundbreaking thing ever, to an audience of people who were introduced to JRPGs through Final Fantasy that defined this style of game through them. I think it's actually really important. So, unfortunately, it's the most known AAA JRPG. It's going to be the number one victim of the overly capitalistic nature of the gaming industry. Right, exactly. Well said. Yeah, Persona and Atlas have grown exponentially over the last decade, and yet their games are still niche. Persona 5 was a phenomenon when it launched, and but as still niche. Well, I mean, Persona 5 has reached 10 million units. So I don't even know if we can call Persona niche anymore at this point. Can we? That's pretty massive. Now, granted, a lot of it was people who play Persona rebuying Persona 5 throughout the years, but they still hit 10 million, which is pretty impressive. In fact, just this last year, I think they sold like 1.7 million copies that came from like their leak sales. So yeah, it did take a decade to do it, but like I said, like in 2024, they had sold like almost 2 million copies. Like again, because they had re-released it for all platforms, and like whether people ended up rebuying it or not, yeah. Yeah, I would say that Silent Hill is more niche than Persona. I would absolutely agree with that for sure. Um, which is kind of crazy. Yeah, we did not finish. We did not actually finish the Rebirth Heart Mode playthrough. Okay, I will tell you what. We will finish Rebirth Heart Mode when when part 3 gets announced. In fact, I will start over from the beginning maybe, and we'll redo it, and we'll yeah, I don't know. Maybe we'll start over, or maybe I'll just finish it from Rufus, but horror games that aren't Resident Evil are niche. Yeah, it does seem like only RE like really broke through on that, but I don't really see most other horror games breaking through in that big way. Out of all the part 3 quotes this week, which one stood out to you the most? Probably the one that I quoted from Hamaguchi in that tweet, where I basically said, "Look, I don't care if you make this an action game or a turn-based game. I just want you to make it like an RPG for real, for real." You know what I'm saying? Like that's kind of my thing. Like that is basically all I feel is most important, is that I just wanted to like really feel like this is a role playing game, and I have to like really engage with the progression systems and my party members and my loadouts and all that other stuff. Because I like that shit. I do. I do think Re Trilogy had solid RPG mechanics, and you really feel it in hard mode. Yeah, I do too. I do too. Like people who were here for like the Rebirth hard mode streams, like ORAM, when we were like strategizing and looking through the character abilities, and at that time it had been like a year since I had touched the game, so I was like having to like relearn all the characters abilities again. And when you learn how all the characters fit together, and some of the boss mechanics and stuff like that, I think that like you get on like Twitter or something, and I see people say like, "Oh, like 16's not really. I mean, not 16. Rebirth is not really that involved in terms of like the puzzle solving elements and like figuring stuff out, and that you can just use assess, and assess will just like tell you how to beat the boss, and like that's kind of all you have to do. It's just assess spam, and that's it. When the combat clicked for you, you were loving it. The Gi fight was incredible, dude. It's like I would say that like some of the best highs I ever got while gaming came from like Re Trilogy and putting things together. Like it's so good and so much fun, and I think you actually have a lot of freedom in how you approach those things. And part of me hates how Assess isn't named Libra. Yeah, but it did actually get me thinking though, because I saw some people talking on Twitter, and they were basically discussing on like oh, it's not real puzzle solving because Assess just tells you what to do. I did kind of think like, would it be interesting to have like Re Trilogy style combat and there was no assess? I wonder if that would be good in any capacity. right? Because I feel like um or maybe if there wasn't no assess, but like you had to like work for assess in like a harder way, and it wasn't like as simple as like going through. But then I think if you didn't have assess, a lot of people would just like get frustrated with the combat, and they'd be like, I don't know it works. Even with assess, making your builds is still a puzzle, right? Yeah, I still feel like you're still like really deep into considering your builds. And so plus assess is optional. Yeah. You can assess spam normal for sure. It's why I wish the current heart mode was made into heart mode plus, no items, but you would still get a heart mode for first playthrough that allowed items just because it'd be a tad too hard without maxing materia, which you can't get in the first run. You do still have to play good too. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's why I don't agree that like assess basically makes the game brain dead. As some people on Twitter were saying. Obviously, this is about like 16 versus like rebirth divisiveness. But yeah, I just don't agree that assess just makes the game brain dead and you don't have to like really engage with it anymore. I feel like assess tells you like gives you like the proper hint on how to engage with it, but it doesn't really tell you, you know, it doesn't really necessarily make it so that you could just do the fight. FF7 Rebirth combat was actually tough sometimes. I couldn't cakewalk it like I did FF16. Yeah. Well, and I think that too. That I guess for some people that like, and this is like different style of like action and like RPG combat too. It's just like just the act of self-expression will kind of be enough for you and figuring out new combos and things like that. But I don't feel like with particularly Final Fantasy that I'm really looking for that. I think that's it's great when I'm playing like a God of War or like a Metal Gear Rising, and you're doing different sick shit. But I really do feel like in Final Fantasy, I want to know how to put things together to win. Right? Like I want to know how to put like together my characters and make them work together so that they can win the fight, right? And that action in itself is also telling a story. Like I feel like there is like a story, like an interactive story in that being told that leads up to the power of friendship when you're making these characters work together in combat um to win to basically defeat the boss. If you have to read, it's not brain dead. Yeah, exactly. Right? Like it's no different than like maybe like a horror game giving you notes and stuff like that, and you do. FF7R is not an action game. You can't button mash or brute force it. You have to build ATB target weaknesses, and make strategy right. And because of that too, like I mean, and people will say this. I mean, technically, this is true with E33, right? But it's also true of technically a lot of action games. If you have perfect timing in E33, nothing else matters, right? But you can actually say that. You can extrapolate that out to every single action game. Because if you have good enough timing in Elden Ring, then like nothing else matters. Because you can just dodge and like parry and get out of everything, right? So you can really say that like in like maybe most action games, actually, if you have perfect timing, then nothing else matters because if you have perfect timing, like what else is there, right? Like you can cheese everything in every action game because all you need is perfect timing. But the thing is that most people probably don't have 100% perfect timing at all times and in all situations, right? And so that's what prevents all action games really from just being like supremely cheesable because, oh, I just have perfect timing. I think with Re-Trilogy combat, not only does it oftentimes require perfect timing, it also requires a lot of thought on just even approaching the enemy to actually do proper damage on them. So um, it's not like a natural skill, right? I don't know anyone who hasn't spent hundreds of hours in a game in order to get perfect timing for every single attack, if not like pushing thousands of hours to get perfect timing for every single attack. All right. Like, I don't know anyone that is just so gifted that every single action game they play is completely trivialized by the fact that they're supremely good at timing, right? Timing in itself is a good enough mechanic because as long as it's brutal and the windows are tight enough, you will have to sit there and learn the timing. And just in doing that, you have to like really kind of engage with the systems, right? So Re-Trilogy Combat IMO is the best case of accessibility, low skill floor, high as hell skill ceiling. Yeah, it's why I like it so much. Because you can like, you can kind of be like a person who just fumbles your way through it on normal, which, let's be honest, probably most of us were when we first played Remake on PS4. Like, we kind of like just fumbled our way through it. And part of that was just due to the fact that Remake felt like such a different action game, right? Like, I still, like, whenever I go back to Remake or Rebirth, I'm like, damn, there's like no fucking action game in the world that feels like this. Like, I cannot tell you like another game that feels like Re-Trilogy's combat does. There's just nothing else. Like, I know some people compare it to even like Tales, right? Because Tales also can have you like stop and like press like, you know, different things, and you can technically select commands in Tales, but it just does not feel the same way that Re-Trilogy does. It is a unique game feel. Rebirth and Kingdom Hearts 3 post Remine are the best cases for SE making combat accessible for everyone, regardless of how easy or hard they want the game to be. Yeah, that's how you do accessibility. I agree. Yeah, if you're an action gamer and you play Re-Trilogy, you'll have a tough time and you're stubborn about switching. If you only play turn-based games, you will struggle because it's a challenge. Yeah, it's a completely different way of thinking when you play Re-Trilogy. Like, you play, like, if you're like a hack and slash person and you go into 7R, you probably think that 7R sucks. And I think that, like, if you look at like a lot of the criticism of 7R's combat that gets levied, it's usually people who are more from like the hack and slash side of gaming, that are like wanting it to play more like a character action game, that feel like really disappointed when it's super weighty. There are more animation locks about things, less so in Rebirth, more so in Remake with the animation locks. So there are a couple in Rebirth too. And it's not really that snappy in terms of it, but like, yeah. I knew a lot of action game fans who hated 7R, and I had to convince them to think differently. Usually those people will be bigger fans of like 16. But like, the reason is because they're wanting, well, I guess this could also be set the other way around too, right? Is that 7R fans will play 16 and they want it to be like more heavily a role-playing game. And then 16 fans will play Re-Trilogy and they want it to be a character action game, right? And if you try to play either of those games like that, you're going to be like really fucking disappointed with both of them. IMO, I think that's indicative of how genius Re-Trilogy's combat system is. Re-Trilogy's combat is the only combat system in gaming that I get giddy just talking about. I get excited just fucking talking about that system because I think it's that cool and that smart and just that well put together. And it's so much fun. Dude, we do have to finish the Rebirth hard mode streams. The only reason those dropped off is because I had a crazy amount of sponsors at the time, and I had to do like a lot of sponsor videos, and I didn't have time to stream. But now that we got that out of the way, I'm like, I kind of want to go back to it. We can't go back to it till after we finish Trails, which we didn't even get around to playing today because we yapped too much. Which I also really love Trails combat. I think Trails combat is also really genius. I really like RPGs, guys. I don't know if you could tell. I think they're really fun. I think they're like the GOAT genre of video game. And yeah, I might be biased, but I do want to play games that RPGs that like let me work with my characters together and make them feel like this cohesive unit. It is good. I do enjoy it. So yapping is my favorite part of these streams, hands down. I mean, I know you guys like me to yap. I know you guys like me to yap. I don't know if you answer, but are you playing Ninja Gaiden 4? I'm willing to. I'm willing to. I don't know when I'll be able to get around to it because we still have to finish Trails, and I wanted to play FF Tactics after this, but I do want to try Ninja Gaiden 4 for sure. I've been hearing good things. I recommend Parasite Eve immensely because it's FF7 combat beta. Ironically, it was the prototype. No, you're not. You're so not fucking wrong. You're so not wrong at all. Parasite Eve is the first re-trilogy combat game. It's actually true. Like, you're not wrong at all. You're gonna play Digimon? Fuck yes, I want to play Digimon. Oh my god, dude, I'm such a Digimon head. As someone who bounced off the Trails demo because of the storytelling, what would you say to have me give it another shot? Um, Imagine a more fun A Realm Reborn, right? And maybe think of like Trails in that way. It's just like you're just kind of like getting into this world and you're just vibing in it. And you're going on these like it's not like at first I was like, is this just like slice of life? And they're kind of building the world out through slice of life. Maybe a little bit, but it feels more like with Trails that it's just like it's more about intimate stakes with characters and understanding the world um, from the perspective of lower stakes adventures and um, kind of understanding this world as a citizen, if that makes sense. And then maybe going from like being a citizen to like playing an active role in that game's world is like the experience of Trails. And so if you play it knowing that this is not a game where I'm going into it and there's immediately going to be these epic JRPG world-ending stakes, and that actually I'm going to explore and get accustomed to a lived world with a lot of lore and a lot of politics, and I'm a 16-year-old kid in that in that world, and I'm going to basically um, play that role. Yeah. You don't get those till like 13 games in. Right. I actually have this appreciation for that. I think actually what made like even like a lot of Final Fantasy 14's expansions like really good is that so much of it didn't immediately hop to this is the end of the world, that it ended up being like really cool. There's things about the story and Trails I want to tell you about, things the game has already showed you, but you're like context right now and I don't want to spoil it. But the whole meme of FF14, get to Heaven's Word and you'll be hooked. Unironically, Trails in the Sky first chapter ending is that, and it never fucking stops from there. Yeah. That's what I already kind of feel. But like even this, you know, because this is basically a realm reborn for Trails. I'm still actually like really enjoying it. I think maybe the best way to think of it is kind of like a cozy game in terms of its narrative. Like you don't have to like necessarily you don't have to like hardcore play it. I don't know if that makes sense. It can really just be like your Steam Deck game that you play like an hour or two of in bed before you sleep, or you have like 30 minutes free and you just want to knock out a side quest really quick and you just do that, and then you go about your day. Yeah, it's a very comfy game. It's a very comfy game. Don't think of it as like this is the game, like, oh, I need to binge this shit and get to like the big story stuff. It really is just like, hey man, you have nothing to do right now. Just play an hour of Trails. It's really fun and it's really comfortable to just sit and like just play it a little bit and just kind of enjoy it. I don't know how to explain it. But yeah, it's just like it's like one of the most comfortable games to just sit and play. Actually, I think that like I kind of think that this is something I miss about kind of like turn-based FF a little bit in general, or like the biggest difference between turn-based and kind of action is that with action games, I do feel like I have to sit up and kind of lock in really heavily. But I do feel like with games like Trails especially, you can really just like cozy your way through a lot of it, if that makes sense. I don't know if what I'm saying is like coherent, but action games require the gamer lean. Yeah. Like it's a game that you can relax to, for sure. I feel like turn-based games in general, unless you're like playing it on like the brutally hardest difficulty, a lot of times you can kind of relax to most of them. They're very relaxing to play. You're in the chapter where the plot does start picking up though, because the prologue in chapter 1 is kind of all about Estelle and Joshua stepping out into the world, but chapter 2 is when things do start building up and maybe you can start seeing the horizon, what you're heading towards. I'm really excited. We'll get to like, we'll somehow make it room for like a second stream of Trails maybe this week, but I want there to be two so that we can do this and because we ended up yapping this stream, which I fear it might have happened, but it did end up happening. That's what Trails in the Sky is probably my favorite game of this year. I don't dare say it on Twitter. It's my game of the year on Twitter. I mean, yeah, it's hard to say that any remake is your game of the year because Twitter heads probably wouldn't like that, and I don't blame them because to some extent, but yeah, I think. Because I don't know if I like considering remakes to be my goatee. Because it is a little unfair. Even E33 was a bit relaxing as I got the adrenaline of dodges and parries. It kind of makes no sense. Really, I didn't feel like E33 was a relaxing game to play. I feel like it was like action games where I had to do the gamer lean. Like when enemies were attacking and I had to parry, I was like, fuck, I gotta sit up. I feel like remakes should count as game of the years for people. DLC, they should be their, I think DLC should be their own category. I do actually think that like it might actually be necessary at this point to have remake / remaster of the year. I think that actually should be a category going forward, considering how many remakes and remasters we're getting. I think remake of the year should be like a legitimate award. I just don't understand like why remake of the year is not. DLC of the year should also be like a thing. That's also not an award for some fucking reason. I'm pretty sure, if I recall correctly. There are so fucking many. Right, there are so fucking many. Why do we not have remake of the year as like an award? I don't know. It's ridiculous. No, I don't say it on Twitter because I'll be mobbed by people telling me I should choose E33 as my game of the year. Listen, brother, as someone whose game of the year is E33, like I got mobbed because I said that like even though E33 is my game of the year, my narrative of the year is Silent Hill F. And they were like, what the fuck are you talking about? And I'm sorry, but my narrative of the year is Silent Hill F. And that's not to say that E33's narrative is bad in any capacity. Obviously, I think it's one of the best video game narratives of all time, actually. But I think the same about Silent Hill F. Yeah, I saw that in his... Yeah. And I was like, dude, I still like the game, and I still think it's probably the best game this year. I just think that this other game had a story that touched me in a way that was slightly ever so slightly deeper than E33's, and I still think E33's story is goated too. But yeah, Twitter has a lot of people that are a little too zealous of everything about everything. I know. Silent Hill F is again game of the year, and it's the best narrative this year. I don't care. Although I see 33 winning. Yeah. Yeah. I think so too. I just think that like okay, so without spoilers for either game, I guess like what made Silent Hill F work for me is that there is a certain like way in which we approach telling video game stories. And I think that like the way Silent Hill F approached telling its story was something I feel is rarely seen in video games. It was profoundly interactive, and it had me putting together pieces of the story in a way that I haven't done for many games ever. Like, there are not many games out there where I get excited about getting new journal entries and new notes. But every single entry of the journal and every single like note that I got, I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. If Silent Hill F's combat was designed by Platinum Games, it would be game of the year. Yeah, the combat is not great. Like that's basically what makes Silent Hill F not game of the year versus like story of the year. Because I'll be honest, it's not the most fun game ever to play. I don't think it's like unfun, but it does not like really like do it for me in terms of like it's not like but then I get that it's a horror game, so it's hard to balance. Yeah, it was made by the same guy that did Higurashi. Does Silent Hill F stories get better with replays and incentivize replays? Yes. It is basically structured like Nier Replicant. Not gonna lie, you just said Versus and it gave me a minor trauma flashback of Dulam's aesthetic. Fuck you. There are layers that unravel with each playthrough. Right. It's the most I have ever wanted to like engage with the story, basically. Right? So every time like a journal entry or like a thing came up, I was like, oh my God. Yeah, E33 made me not want to play the game anymore. E33's endings made me not want to play the game anymore. Silent Hill F did the opposite. Yeah. That's probably like the thing that broke the tie for me is that E33's endings. I mean, like E33's endings feel like okay, that's kind of the end of it, right? And then Silent Hill F's first ending, gives you such a major mindfuck and such a major recontextualization of the story that you are immediately like, oh my God, I need to fucking replay this entire game right now. I every single line of dialogue is different now because of Silent Hill, like the ending of this game. I am like blown away. Have you heard of the streamer called DSP? He said Silent Hill F was the top Japanese game and the developer should respect its American customers. He was being serious too. He couldn't fighter figure out the puzzles. Wait, what happened? I'm actually confused. He said that it was top Japanese and American should respect its customers. Wait, what do you mean? A lot of the Silent Hill F is Fatal Frame coded, so when is the NSP due to try out Fatal Frame? The fan favorite remake too. Oh yeah. I'm down to try Fatal Frame too. Pretty similar aesthetic, right? So yeah, I want to try Fatal Frame. I can kind of feel myself getting into like more niche horror as time goes along. I'm assuming he meant it was too Japanese. Oh, he said Silent Hill F was too Japanese. Oh, and the developer should expect its American customers. Oh. Oh, that's fucking lame. I don't know that person, but that's supremely like loser behavior. If anyone said that, I would say that's lame as shit. I don't know about who they are, but like, um, nobody takes him seriously. His whole shtick is being shit and having shit opinions. Okay. So are you really enjoying Trails in the Sky? I've never lied about enjoying a video game. I always lean. I mean, I'm always pretty honest. I think my feelings may change about some stuff as time goes on, but yeah, usually if I say I like that shit, then I really like that shit. Only time, only time. Well, no, because even then, yeah. So basically, anytime I say it, I like it. Yeah, that's another thing too, is that I never criticize games if I'm bad at them. I don't like, some stuff I definitely do suck at, or I'm not like the best. But usually I actually like a game that I kind of suck at, because I like games that like kind of push me out of my comfort zone a little bit, and like maybe force me to adapt in ways uh, that are new for me. So I think it's awesome. Are you ready to play the other 12 games? That's going to be interesting to figure out, because I do want to keep playing the Sky arc on the remakes, but I might start, and I know that like some Trails fans might kill me for this. I might start Cold Steel while I wait for the rest of the Sky remakes to roll out. Is that a terrible idea, Trails fans? Start Azure? Okay. Because I just want the rest of the Trails game. I mean, I want the rest of the Sky games as the remakes are, because I've fallen too much in love with the remake. I think that don't start Azure 2-0 or Cold Steel. Okay. Well, fuck me. Azure is 0-2. Oh, okay. Cold Steel are the main Trails games I played, and those are pretty good. Okay. Cold Steel seems like really up my alley. I know that they're vaguely similar to like kind of Persona, because they have like a calendar system. So I've played like a Dragon games. I've never finished any of them though. But I played like 20 hours of 7 and then like another 20 hours of 0, and I didn't finish either of them. I really enjoyed 7 though, and I should have finished 7. Because the combat system in 0 was like okay, but the turn-based in Yakuza 7 was pretty fucking good. This is no shade to you, Night Sky Prince, but I'm glad you turned the difficulty down after playing a bit in hard mode. Also, now the Sky Arc, whilst set up, is also somewhat self-contained. Cold Steel and 0/Azure are more deeply connected, though. 0 and Azure take place at the same time as Cold Steel 1 and 2. Okay. Cold Steel can be played as the first entry in the arc, but it does spoil 2 major things from the Trails in the Sky second chapter. Okay. So don't touch Cold Steel until second chapter comes out. Okay. You might be able to finish them by the time 7R3 comes out. Yeah, if I play literally nothing else. If I play literally nothing fucking else and I like dedicate my life to Trails. I can finish all of them before. Dude, that's like literally like almost 1,000 hours of video game across like 13 games. I'm sure. So that's a lot. There's nothing wrong with adjusting difficulty and settings in games. I don't feel so bad about it in turn-based games for whatever reason. I feel like in turn-based games, it's just like, how hard do I want to like stress myself out over this? And how hard do I want to grind and strategize? I feel like in action games, though, whenever I turn down the difficulty, I'm being a little bitch. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, like turn-based games, if it's like there's a difficulty, I'm probably just gonna play normal on most turn-based games. I'll be real with you. But like, if I'm playing an action game, then I always want to play on like the hardest fucking difficulty and shit. Do you think they'll include Stella Nox Foray in the new Dissidia game since they included Gaia? Oh boy. Let me tell you what they are going to do. They're not going to include Stella Nox Foray, but what they are going to do is give you Luna Freya, and they are going to give you a like a Stella costume for Luna Freya. And the reason I assume that they are going to do this is because in Dissidia NT, Noctis has a Versus 13 costume. And so it stands to reason that not only will he might have a Versus 13 costume in Dissidia Duelum as well, Stella could also get, or Luna Freya, I should say, could also get a Stella costume. So I think that'll happen. But it seems Falcom, at least based on the Kondo's interviews, plan to get the remakes out pretty damn quick. Also, they have the most assets ready, and they have shown they have created some assets and cutscenes from second chapter which aren't part of the first chapter. So likely that second chapter is going to release in 2026. Damn, that's awesome. I'd love to be able to go straight from first chapter to second. Dissidia Duelum and Cage 4 both being not Versus 13 still kills me. One or the other. One or the other is fine, but not both, Nomina. Oh, dude, he's going to turn everything into Versus. I'm actually here for it because, you know, I think that they screwed him over, and he is going to make sure that the people get Versus no matter what. People should be able to enjoy easy without judgment. I get annoyed with push for games that have dumbed down gameplay baked in. When you have a lot of modern games that scream hints at you. Yeah. I think that games should be difficult by design. They should be challenging by design. And I think that easy should make the game accessible for you to play for those who aren't trying to deal with that inherently challenging design. And it's really easy to make a game that has a ton of depth and a lot of mechanics kind of streamlined and easier, but you can't really make an inherently easy game super challenging. And this kind of goes back to 15, right? Like FF15 is inherently not a challenging game because at any time you can pause the game and use potions, right? Like you can always pause the game and potion spam. And as long as you can potion spam, you are basically infinitely alive. There aren't too many so 15, like in numerous other ways that you could use examples of, is an easy game by design. It is hard baked in. There is no way to make a harder difficulty for Final Fantasy 15 as it currently is, because it would really just be like an incredibly unfun experience where you just potion spam and just like do like a lot of like high DPS attacks that really aren't particularly fun to engage with, because inherently it's not a deep game, right? It's not a challenging, intricate game. So I think what you do is that you take a challenging, intricate game and then you add accessibilities. You give the characters more potions, more stuff that they can abuse, less punishment, things like that. You let up off the gas a little bit, and then it becomes, something that people can play comfortably with. But don't bake easiness into the design. I think that's an important part. I always like the story: easy, normal, hard, nightmare, difficulty scaling in the games. Yeah, that's another thing too, is that there's a lot of different options for you finding the difficulty that you like. What do you think he would have accomplished if they let him make Versus a musical? He would have accomplished like a good Final Fantasy game. That's what the fuck he would have accomplished. I actually think a video game that's a musical is an incredible idea, and I actually do think that somebody should do that. If The Greatest Showman was of like a fucking video game, do you understand like how amazing that would be? Do you understand how that would be like fucking cinema? Like like I actually do think there should be a musical video game. Like 100%. It's just really hard because a musical video game is like, who's going to invest the money in doing that? Because it's never really been done before. Where characters in like a AAA game are just going to break out in this song. But fuck, man. It's great. Expedition 33 absolutely could have been a musical for sure. That game could have actually been a musical, 100%. At this point, I don't give a fuck about what he would have accomplished. It would have prevented Kingdom Hearts from not being, from being forced into being not Versus 13. Yeah. Sandfall's next game, Les Miserables, the JRPG. Yeah. Dude, actually, like, unironically, I hope that is, like, their next game. Remake had a drag show, Rebirth had a play, Part 3 will definitely have a musical. Actually, I thought those were, like, brilliant parts of those games, respectively. I love the Magic Girl shit in 10-2. I kind of think that after K-pop Demon Hunters, Magic Girl shit is like on the rise again. K-pop Demon Hunters, Freerin, Magic Girl, Stay Winning Brothers. Yeah, the return of the songstress, bro. It's like, we're here. Like, let's fucking do it. It's pronounced Les Miserables, whatever. There's an RPG called Stray Gods that is actually a musical RPG. You should check out the preview. Oh shit, that's tight. Well, I think that JRPGs are like so like heavily linked to music that it just really makes sense to like do a musical with a JRPG. The most recent Trails game is so reliant on understanding every single Trails arc that even Kondo himself goes against the usual marketing strategy of recommending it for first-time players. That's actually kind of crazy. Because, damn, usually you do want to do it. Sorry, NSP don't speak croissant. I know. I changed my PFP now. I'm Titus now, so I don't speak French no more. Wait, no, it's Italian, right? Is it Italian? It's Italian, isn't it? I don't actually know. No, it's French. You're right. Huh. Shows what I know. Oh, yeah, that makes even more sense for Sandfall to make it. Do you think, why do you think Square higher-ups got mad at TM for suggesting it? What are you talking about? Oh, you mean TN? You like Tetsuya Nomura? David Bowie is in a video game. Okay, technically, but not technically, but the Emperor from FF2 is just fucking David Bowie. Specifically as Jareth, the Goblin King from Labyrinth. Yeah, I could see it. Oh, making Versus a musical. I always interpreted that was like satire and that he really wasn't like seriously suggesting that, but I actually think that was like one of his best ideas ever, was to turn Versus into a musical. And in terms of like Final Fantasy doing new stuff, I'm kind of like, let's turn it into a musical rather than like, doing some of this other stuff. Speaking of songstress, I wish that job has more widespread into other FF games, like how Bard is. Dude, I think that you should have a songstress in your party for Final Fantasy 17. I do. You should play as like this knight or some sort of guardian type job, and like you should be like the bodyguard for like the songstress, and that should be like the start of the game. You're like protecting this songstress from people who want to like, I don't know, kidnap her or something. And that's like the opening scene of like FF17. There you go. That shit would go crazy. Bodyguard. That's funny. Please show chat the picture of David Bowie in the movie Labyrinth. Okay, let me see. Do they have like a picture of him next to the Emperor? Oh wait, I can find it right here. Hold on. Yeah, you can kind of see the resemblance there. I just found like a Twitter post on it. Where someone's talking about how they do vaguely. Share some characteristics. David Bowie was literally involved in a game back in the early 2000s. I don't remember if Dev Hell or the game was bad. Omicron, the Nomad Soul. That was the Bowie game. He even made music for it. Oh shit, I didn't know that. The villain would want to steal the songstress's voice. Oh shit, that's actually tight. Dotto, actually, I think we're fucking cooking. I think we're actually fucking cooking like a legit FF17 at this point. Let's go. And then like, okay, but she can't be like the main villain, right? She's like the B villain. And then she turns out she'd be like a late game party member. Why does that sound like a 10-2 subplot, side plot? It is kind of 10-2 coded. And like slightly K-pop Demon Hunters coded. But the K-pop Demon Hunters is 10-2 coded anyway. So, yeah. So it is kind of like 10-2 too. Also Little Mermaid coded. Listen, I just think it'd be tight as fuck if we start because, well, technically, because the first Final Fantasy game to have a music number in it is not Final Fantasy X-2. It's actually Final Fantasy VI, right? In the opera scene. And then that's when we have like our first like music number in the game. And then in the Pixel remaster, they actually added vocals to it, which was really cool. So, didn't that happen in Metaphor? Oh yeah, you do have a songstress in Metaphor. You have Juna. Bro, you guys are right. We need to bring back the songstress. You guys are so fucking right. We need to bring back the songstress. You have a male and female main character. You have a songstress, and you have like the bodyguard character, and then you have the villainess that's trying to steal her voice for some reason, and that's like the opening plot. FF17, baby, let's go. It'd be cool if they had a few jobs tied to side content that were based on past protagonists. That would actually be cool. I actually don't know if I want 17 to bring back the job system or not. I actually kind of liked when a little bit when jobs are like fixed to the characters, or like the characters kind of had like a little bit more unique mechanics that were like inspired by jobs. But I'm open to the job system coming back. Like I think what I'd rather have is like sub jobs. Like like each character has like a main job, and then you can choose to like make them inherit like sub jobs into like their main job, such that like I think that would actually be more interesting for me than just like job system go crazy with like anything. Because I feel like narratively you want the character to do that job for like a good reason, right? Which usually makes the job system like kind of like arbitrary, because then it's just like, oh, I want to be a dragoon, so I just grab the lance and then I become a dragoon, right? But I kind of want your story to be that you're a dragoon, right? And that there's a deep reason for you being a dragoon. FF4 pilled, basically. So I want you to be, so I think a sub job system would actually be cooler than like just like a job system, right? So let's say that you have a character that's a dragoon. Maybe he can learn skills from the songstress in the party, and then you can actually blend his dragoon skills with the songstress's skills, and then you can have different builds for him in that way. Yeah, I prefer them character driven as well. Tend to use dress spheres, but more more versions of the unique ultimate dress spheres. Yeah, that's kind of my preference too. I like it like character driven. I think Final Fantasy X, which I know is my ideal FF game in most respects, but like I think like FF10, where it's like your characters do have a job, and is it's just like, oh, they have a job, but then they also have like all this other stuff that they can learn. Yeah, like Octopath. I'm back, King, just in case you missed me. Something like that, where it's just like you learn basically, like the character has a job, but then they also can learn stuff from the other jobs, and then it blends together. But it's never not like Aaron isn't a samurai, right? But he can learn time mage and black magic stuff to blend into his samurai stuff. Love both your scripted and non-scripted content. Like, sorry, I know I'm a half an hour behind the stream, but just wanted to say that I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Play by Dom. They have that in Tactics. I love that shit. Yeah, so that would actually be my preferred style, right? It's not that you're going to like make the dragoon a paladin. It's just that you're going to teach the dragoon like paladin sub skills, and he'll learn that, and the party will learn from each other. Which again, having that system in place reinforces this idea of party synergy and bonds, and these characters coming together, and we're like this ragtag group of people that don't fucking belong in this world society. We're outcast, and somehow we come together and kill God and reset the power balance in this world, right? So I think that maybe both could use red mage stuff. Yeah, I think that would be awesome. Yeah, so I want the characters to be like, this guy is a dragoon. He cannot be anything other than a dragoon, because that is like just too important to the story to like make him like all of a sudden the dragoon is now a songstress or something like that. But he can learn songstress abilities, and because of that, he's able to better synergize like with the other party members and things like that, and you can still have a ton of build options. Also, all the characters don't become blank slates. You know what I'm saying? Like, so it's not like, oh, I can just make like I can do like a whole white mage run, which yes, does have like a lot of replayability to it. But for the sake of the story, if anyone can just be a white mage, I feel like it's not going to be as good. I think this is why they actually moved away from the job system in kind of like most of the later Final Fantasies. barring FF12 where they kind of included it, semi included it in the international Zodiac job system, and hence the Zodiac age. But I think it's better for like characters to have that kind of like unique abilities. So like persona moves where a character can learn any ability, but only limited to 8 moves. Yeah. Because, you know, when you can just have any character be summoner, Yuna now suddenly seems like she's not that important, right? Or if any character can just be, you know, but like at the same time, as you go through the game, Yuna can learn black magic. And then Yuna actually ends up being a better black mage than Lulu because Yuna has better magic stats. So, if they did it like DQ11 where everyone in the party is just innately a combination of various vocations, then I'm okay with that. Yeah. Imagine Waka summoning Bahamut. Yeah. When was the last mainline game to have a sure job system? I don't know if you can count 12 because 12 included a job system in like its re-release. It wasn't really baked into, I mean, kind of. I don't know if you could really count 12 or not. I guess other than 11 and 14, if we're strictly talking about the single player games, the last one to have a job system was 5? Or am I forgetting something? Yeah, damn. Yeah. Yeah, I guess you can kind of count the Zodiac age, but if you're not counting the Zodiac age, um then 5. Technically 13, maybe. I don't know if I consider paradigms the same as jobs. I think they're, although paradigms are supposed to be like an extremely streamlined job system, but you know, I feel like the Zodiac age should count. Then if the Zodiac age counts, then like not since 12. Yeah. Yeah, so tactics, yeah. So really 3, 5, tactics 12. Yeah, it's 5. 6 sort of has a job system as well via the Eidolon crystals. But the characters have unique mechanics, yeah. That's like a thing, or like part of why I'm a little on like bringing back like a job system, is because I do want characters to have unique mechanics, right? Like I don't want each character to just be like a blank slate and then they don't have their own unique mechanics. I think that like because like outside of limit breaks, this is like kind of a problem with 7 OG, was that each character was kind of just like this really blank slate. And yeah, I just don't want the characters to be completely blank slates. Like I do want them to have like unique abilities that are like fitted to them and their story. But I also want them to be highly customizable as well. And I think that that's kind of the compromises that they have that. And also I just like each character having their own restricted job that they do, right? So I guess you could say I do want there to be a job system, but kind of like in like a like let's say an FF6 way or an FF10 way versus like an FF5 way, where it's just like you can do literally any job. But it's more like, no, you can't do literally any job, but you do have all the jobs in the game, and every job is represented by a character themselves that join your party, and they have sub jobs that they can do. And I think that's more interesting. And then maybe they can upgrade their jobs too, which would be really interesting. So maybe your Dragoon actually, like, you know, like really old school Final Fantasy stuff. Like maybe your Dragoon actually does start out as a Lancer, and then they actually get Dragoon halfway through the game. and then that unlocks a ton of new abilities and mechanics for your character, right? So that's another way that they could approach it and kind of do it. That's like, yeah, kind of like Metaphor to an extent, with the more advanced archetypes requiring specific mastery for each character. Yeah. So like the primary jobs upgrade, but sub jobs are the first stage only. I actually like that. Yeah, that's kind of like what I think would be like cool in terms of like how they could do it. Okay, I think we are going to call it a stream for today. If you are on Twitch, let's raid my friend Miru Buns. She's playing Silent Hill F. And if you're on YouTube, I love you. And I'll see you all soon, later throughout this week, where we will actually play Trails for real this time, I promise. Okay, sorry we didn't get to it today. Okay, love you guys so much, and I will see you next time.